Hey team, Yasin here, and in this training we are going to be going over your legal, finance, and accounting foundations. We're going to go ahead and give you the entire background behind it, as well as the step-by-step instructions to make sure that you set up your foundations properly for this very important topic and department of your business. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. Of course, as always, inside of this module, we are continuing our theme of launching your remote wellness practice version 1.0, as well as completing the final trainings for you to get your remote wellness certification. Now, I do have a couple quick notes that I want to go ahead and hop into before we actually go ahead and talk about the training. The very first one, and this is going to be very important, especially when you are referring back to the guide for this training, is that the outline feature here in Google Docs is going to be extremely beneficial. This is going to be one of those trainings that is more like a textbook, that is more like a seminar that you are going to need to refer back to and probably study in the future as well. And so for the guide, you can actually click on View and then click on Show Outline, and then there is a clickable outline on the left side of this specific guide that is going to allow you to be able to skip and jump around to the parts that you need specifically for this training. Okay, so that is the first very important note that I did want to go ahead and point out as we go ahead and get started in this training. The next point that I want to go ahead and talk about is about the definition of over delivery, because I'm about to go ahead and make an extremely bold claim right now, and you're going to see that claim go ahead and prove itself out over the course of this entire training. Is that this training is the definition, in our opinion, of over delivery. Okay, we have spent, I'm not even joking with you, we have spent an insane amount of time putting this training together for you. This is why we call this the definition of why this program is different, is inside of this training. Because when we first started in this online income game, and over the last 10 years, we have purchased hundreds of different education courses and coaching programs and mentorships and masterminds and all of that kind of stuff. And the thing is that when it came down to the legal, finance, and the accounting topics, every single one of those programs told us to do the exact same thing. They said, hey, do your own research, or talk to a lawyer, or talk to an accountant, or talk to your accountant, and that was it, right? Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, but the thing is that no one, and I mean no one, ever took the time to actually educate us on anything. Why? Probably because either they themselves didn't truly understand the legal, finance, and accounting topics that we're going to be talking about inside of this training, or they just didn't want to take the time to actually simplify it for their students. And so no program has ever talked to us about what you are about to go through inside of this training. And honestly, we have literally spent hundreds of hours of research and development and pounding our heads against the walls in order to simplify the knowledge that you are about to get access to and be explained to in a way that, in our opinion, has never been explained before, okay? And the reason why we know that it's never been explained that way before is because it is completely proprietary in the way that we're going to be talking about. The diagrams, the explanations, everything has been created by our research and development and our training creation team in order to make sure that this is as simple as it could be. So I'm not joking when we say that we've literally spent so much time putting this together for you, okay? And so we have done all of this in order to make sure that we can bring to you the most cutting edge education that anyone has ever received on the topics of legal, finance, and accounting, hands down. And this is why I said that I'm about to make a claim that you're going to see get proven over the course of the rest of this training. And so this is that claim. We promise to you that if you go through this training, right, and you are just even somewhat familiar with what we're about to talk about, right? I'm not saying, hey, be good at it or be an expert at it or memorize it. I'm saying even if you are just familiar with what it is that we're about to talk about inside of this training. Like I said, this training is more like a seminar and more like a textbook, okay? I'm telling you right now that you are going to be ahead of 99.99% of beginners when they are starting their online income and, quite frankly, their business and income in general, regardless of if it is online or not, okay? So from just this training alone, you are going to be ahead of 99.99% of beginners. Never mind the rest of the entire RWA program, okay? And we guarantee that, okay? And you might not believe me right now. And that's why I said I'm going to make a claim. And so I'm telling you right now that this training alone is worth the price of this entire program, period, okay? And so that's why I am especially excited to be able to go ahead and talk to you about what it is that we're going to talk about inside of this training. Now, that does mean that because this is going to be a little bit more of a dense topic, because it's going to be jam-packed, it does mean that it is going to be a little bit of a longer training. And so now some students at this point might say, hey, Coach Yasin, do you not know that students' attention span these days starts to decrease when a training starts to get longer than 15 minutes, right? Why are all of these trainings so long? So here's the thing. I myself personally have been an educator for over 15 years now. I myself have taught both in traditional education, academic world, as well as the alternative education world. Also, the entire RWA team, we have over 30 years experience in education and coaching and training development, okay? So do you not think that we already know that the attention span of a student drops if the training is longer than 15 minutes? Of course we know that, right? But then the question is, why do we have all of these longer trainings in the RWA program? Well, here's the thing. It is by design and extremely deliberate. Why? Because of the fact that the longer trainings allow for consolidation of topics and they are easier to reference back, right? Imagine if we took the same training and we divided up into like 10 or 15 different trainings. And then let's say you wanted to reference back the material that was in here. You're going to have to think, where was that in one of these 10 different trainings that he was talking about, the legal, finance, and accounting foundations and this specific topic? You're going to have to go through all of these different trainings, right? And so that's why it allows for easier reference to be able to go back to it, okay? And the thing is that the RWA classroom is not like a normal program. Even if you look at the guides, you look at the way that we actually record the trainings, you look at the interactiveness, right? You look at that, it allows you in the e-learning environment to pause, take a break, and then come back whenever you need it, right? Versus when students are sitting right now in universities around the world and they spend an hour or two in a lecture listening to a professor and they can't even pause or take a break, right? If they go to the restroom, they all of a sudden miss whatever the professor was saying. And then on top of that, inside of the RWA classroom, you can go through these trainings at 1.5x, 2x, 3.5x, whatever x speed that you want to go through. And if you don't know how to do that at this point inside of the training program, you should definitely learn how to do that, right? And then it also allows for the longer trainings to flesh out and provide more details and really promotes that in-depth learning, right? And so at the end of the day, if students can spend hours every single day on YouTube and Netflix and social media and all of this kind of stuff, why can they not spend that same amount of time being able to go through a training to better their education, right? And so the truth is that to get a proper education, it's not going to happen in a 5-minute video. And so there's an unfortunate reason why so many in society's current broken paradigm are unable to sit their butts down long enough for them to be able to sit, think, read, and study. And so if your current version 1.0 self is unable to sit down long enough to study because you get restless with longer trainings, well, guess what? That's okay, because you can actually work on that. You can become a different version of yourself that is able to sit down, study, and learn, right? Maybe that didn't serve you in a different season of your life, but in this season of your life, it's different. And you might have to become someone else, okay? And so this is just food for thought for any students who might still struggle with the idea of longer trainings. Yes, we know there's a reason for that. And the answer to that question is, hey, watch at 2x speed, take breaks, replace your hours of social media or dead time every single day as needed, and please be respectful of the insane amount of effort that our team puts in order to provide you the highest quality education possible. So yes, they are longer trainings, and don't worry, you're going to be able to get used to them, and you're going to be able to become somebody who can actually study and focus for a longer period of time, just like a muscle, okay? Now, with that being said, and those are the couple introductions that I wanted to go ahead and start off with, let's go ahead and now talk about the actual layout of this training, because like I've said now 2, 3, 4, 5 times, is that this is going to be more like a seminar. It is going to be more like a textbook reference. So what's going to happen is that the biggest chunk of this training is going to be broken down for you inside of the corporations and legal entities section of this training. And it's going to be broken down for you in a way that is going to serve you for the rest of your life. Okay, we're going to walk you through how to be able to set up your legal entity, exactly what a legal entity is, the background of it, as well as how to set up your business bank account. Okay, and then after that, as we start to close out this training, we're going to then walk you through step by step on setting up your online payment system. And then finally, as well as setting up your legal agreement as well. Okay, so that is how the layout of this training is going to be broken down. Now, the other point that I do want to go ahead and mention, and this is very important to mention whenever we talk about finance, legal, or accounting topics, is that Remote Wellness Academy, its holding company, and DBAs, we do not provide tax, legal, or accounting advice, okay? I want to make this clear. We are not tax, legal, or accounting professionals. The material and the training that you're about to go through has been prepared for general knowledge and information purposes only, okay? It is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for tax, legal, or accounting advice. All of the examples that are given inside of this training, the diagram illustrations, all of them are for hypothetical example purposes only. Many of the tax percentages and dollar amounts in the diagrams that we're going to go through are going to be different based on every single person's situation, how many dependents they have, on their tax filing situation. Are they filing married? Are they filing joint? All of that kind of stuff, right? Are they filing single? And so at the end of the day, you should go ahead and consult your own tax, legal, and accounting advisors before actually engaging in any transactions and making any decisions based off of what is it that we're going to cover, okay? And if you do not have your own tax, legal, and accounting advisor, we are going to be going ahead and be recommending to you one of those later on inside of this training as well. Beautiful. Now, with that being said, and with that out of the way, let's go ahead and hop into the very first topic in the very first section, which is going to be corporations and legal entities. So like we said, the bulk of this training, we are going to go ahead and go deep on corporations and legal entities so that once and for all of these questions are going to be answered for you, because I cannot count how many students over the years have gotten stuck on this. Okay, we see this all the time with those beginners and just getting started. And quite frankly, even with those who are been in business for a while, they still get stuck on this. Okay, it is a question that absolutely haunts so many people. Questions like, hey, do I need to register my business with the government, right? How does all of this work? Do I need an LLC, an S Corp, a C Corp? What about a DBA? What is the best bank account that I need to sign up for as an online income earner? Do I need a lawyer? Do I got to do this now or later? Or any of the other gazillion questions that students have around this topic. And quite frankly, it is overwhelming at first, right? We remember when we were starting out, this was something that was so scary for us because we're not talking about just like, whatever mom and pop store down the street. We're talking about the government. We're talking about taxes. We always had this fear when we were starting out, like, oh man, this could land me in jail or I could have fines, right? Even if that wasn't 100% true, we didn't know at that time. And so especially for those of you who are brand new, maybe you've been working a normal 9-to-5 job, a W-2, right? You've never set up your own business before. It's all so scary. And then the worst part about all of this is that the general population, the vast majority of the population knows nothing about this topic. So literally, if you ask your parents or your family members or anybody like that, they don't know any better. And so everybody just says, oh, go talk to a lawyer, or hey, you do this and do this and do this, right? And so sure, you can go ahead and talk to a lawyer, no problem. But what about being educated on these topics so that way you can actually understand what's going on, right? Nobody actually explains these topics. And so what happened was that this was such a painful topic over and over and over again for all of the students that were coming into our programs that in the newest revamped version of this program, the one that you are currently in, we decided to go ahead and do what basically no other education program out there has ever done. We're going to go ahead and answer all of these questions once and for all, so that way by the end of this training, you will have a complete A to Z understanding of what it is that you need in your business to have it officially registered, as well as having your business bank account open, and you will have all the foundational understanding of how the system works behind the scenes, so that way you will never be jailed or handcuffed to somebody ever again, because you understand what it is that they are talking about. And so we're going to go ahead and hop right in. We're going to go ahead and start this corporation and entity, legal entity section by talking about the overall understanding. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do a clouds overview of corporations, legal entities, and taxes. And then that way we'll go ahead and start making it practical by getting into the trenches into the second half of this section. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about that overall understanding right now. So what you got to know from an overall standpoint is that there are 5 main legal entities inside of the United States for the purposes of doing business. Okay, we're going to talk about Canada in just a second, but in the United States, there are 5 of them. There's a sole proprietorship, there's a partnership, LLC, S corporation, and there is a C corporation, okay? And now in terms of the details around this, don't worry, you don't need to memorize any of this. We're going to go through this very, very quick. This is just a quick overview, okay? A sole prop, just so you know, is when one person is the entire business. It's a one-man, one-woman business, right? It's not something that you have to register. By default, anybody who transacts any sort of money is by default a sole proprietor, okay? Automatically. A partnership is when 2 people are doing business together. Legally, by default, they are a partnership, regardless of if they are registered or not. Now, asterisk here in terms of not the most recommended tax saving way to run a partnership. I'm not going to get into that here right now. Number 3 is LLC. LLC stands for Limited Liability company. It's one of the newer corporate structures. It's very flexible. It's flexible because it can be taxed as a sole prop, a partnership, an S Corp, a C Corp. We're going to talk more about this shortly, okay? S Corp stands for Small Business Corporation. It's a pass-through entity. Don't worry, you don't have to really care about what that means at this point. All that just means is that profits are passed on to the owners. And then finally, you have C Corp, which stands for Corporation under Chapter C of the IRS Code. Again, don't worry, you don't have to know that. But the biggest thing about C Corps is that the owners and the corporations are taxed separately, okay? This is typically for companies that have board of directors. Think of like stock market companies, that kind of stuff as well on there, okay? So that is the quick overview of the 5 types of legal entities. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and look at which of these 5 are corporations and which ones are not. So let's go ahead and talk about unincorporated versus incorporated, okay? So out of these 5 types of legal entities, 2 are unincorporated and 3 are incorporated, okay? Now, these are just fancy terms. That means 2 of them are not corporations and 3 of them are corporations, okay? So the 2 types of legal entities that do not require registration and are not corporations are a sole prop and a partnership, okay? So these 2 are not corporations, okay? They're not incorporated. And then the 3 types of legal entities that are corporations that do require registration are LLCs, S Corps, and C Corps. The reason why this is important to know is that whenever something has to be registered, it is going to have to be something that gets registered with the state, with the IRS. And so there's typically fees and filing fees and all that kind of stuff that goes along with it, okay? Now, again, remember, you do not need to memorize this. This is just for us to go over quickly, so that way you are just familiar with it, okay? So that is the US legal system. Now let's go ahead and talk about legal entities in Canada, because obviously we do have quite a few Canadian students as well. Now, the beautiful thing about this and the great news about this is that the legal and tax system in Canada is actually much, much, much simpler than in the US, okay? So although the unincorporated entities are pretty much the same, the unincorporated entities in Canada are also sole props and partnerships. However, the incorporated entities, that's where it's a little bit different, because in Canada, there really is only one main option when it comes to incorporation, which is the CCPC Corporation, Canadian Controlled Private Corporation, okay? So that is a big difference here as opposed to the US system that has 3 main popular corporation types, okay? So the CCPC works very similarly to how the C Corp works in the US, in which there is a separation between the owners and the profits, and there is no pass-through, okay? Now, technically, on that note, in Canada, there is also other corporations like private corporations and public corporations and a separation between the 2. But for the purposes of what it is that we are talking about, it is not that important, okay? Also, just to show you how kind of similar they are, but also somewhat simpler, is that in Canada, there is the equivalent of the IRS, which is called the Canada Revenue Agency, the CRA, okay? And then there's also a similar system to the Social Security system, but we don't need to necessarily go into that right now because Canadians will always tell us that they have universal health care, but that's a whole separate topic. Now, the other point that I'll go ahead and mention here is that the content of what we're about to talk about does not apply to those cases in which those businesses have permanent establishments in the United States, right? So if there's a Canadian business and they run a branch or an office or something like that in the US, that's where they are in a different situation, because now they have to go ahead and file for US tax returns as well as Canadian tax returns. So if you're running an online business, this would not necessarily apply to you, right? But I am just going ahead and mentioning that if you were to ever have, say, hey, I am a Canadian and I'm going to go ahead and have a physical office in the US, then obviously there are going to be other ramifications around that. And the big disclaimer around this is make sure that you do your own research. Don't take our word from it. This is just general information from our own experience. But obviously we know less about the Canadian system than we do about the US system. But for the most part, you're going to find that that is everything that there is to know about the Canadian system compared to the US system when it comes to corporations. And so on that note, what that does mean for the Canadian students is that yes, all of this training is still going to apply to you, right? It's going to be just as important for you as a Canadian student as well, because this entire training is going to be discussing when to incorporate, right? That is going to be the question. Yes, we're going to go ahead and talk about some nuances around LLCs and that kind of stuff, but when we get to that section, you're going to see that the main decision that needs to be made is whether or not a student is going to be a sole prop versus an LLC, right? That's the question for US students. And the question for Canadian students is going to be whether or not you're going to be a sole sole prop versus a CCPC, right? So same topic, just a slightly different term. And then if there are other slight variations around this as well, then there are a lot of resources because the Canadian system is a lot simpler. You're going to see here how to open a business bank account in Canada as a sole prop. There are so many resources that are available for that as well. Okay, now for all those Canadians who are going to say, hey, the US always complicates everything, why is the Canadian system so much more simpler? Two reasons. Number one, okay, the US has 10 times the population of Canada. In fact, just one US state, the state of California, has 39 million people, which is more than the entire population of Canada. Okay, if you take the entire population of Canada, it has less people than just California by itself. I don't know if you know that, but now you know. Okay, and then the second reason is that there are 30 times more businesses in the US. And so for a country that has 10 times more people and 30 times more businesses, the system is probably going to be a little bit more complex, right? This is me going ahead and justifying why we have more complexity in the US for the Canadian students who like to sometimes play jokes with this, okay? Now, on that note, as we go ahead and transition from here, I want to go ahead and talk to you about a pre-warning, okay? So now we've gone ahead and talked about the overall understanding. We've gone ahead and talked about the 5 main legal entities. And now some students at this point might say, Coach Yasin, we haven't even barely started yet, and I'm already overwhelmed and scared, okay? So the question is that as we start to dive into this, and you're going to see why this pre-warning is very important, you're going to say, hey, Coach Yasin, we've barely even started. I'm not really that overwhelmed. Well, there's a reason why we put this pre-warning right here at this part of the training, because in just a second, this is going to go from 0 to 100 miles an hour very quickly, okay? And so before we go ahead and get into that complexity, before we get into that overwhelm, I want to go ahead and pre-frame your mind. I want to go ahead and prepare your mind about this, because here's the question for you. How many reps have you ever had looking and learning about legal and tax structures, right? I'm going to guess maybe that you don't spend your free time just looking at legal and tax structures. Do you? And so here's another question for you, is that were you overwhelmed the first time that you tried to ride a bike or learn how to swim or learn how to drive? The answer is probably, right? So do you think that you are not going to be overwhelmed the first time that you actually look at tax and legal structures? Of course you are, right? But remember, skill equals knowledge times reps. And so this material is no different than anything else that you've ever learned for the first time. And so if there are millions of people out there who have been able to learn this before you, so can you, okay? So asking questions around, hey, why am I so afraid? How do I get past this feeling? Here's the thing. It's absolutely and completely normal to feel the way that you are about to feel just now. Okay, I'm justifying it. Right now, you might be at the beginning of this training and say, hey, Coach Yasin, I don't feel the way that you're saying right now. But here's the thing. I'm talking about this right now to prepare your mindset, okay? Is that we all feel overwhelm, confusion, fear, doubt, and uncertainty, okay? There is no, hey, how do I get over this feeling? Winner students and failure students all feel the same way. The only difference is that the failure uniform students let those feelings stop them while the winner students keep pushing through despite how they feel, despite the fear, doubt, and uncertainty. And so before you go ahead and start to judge how you are feeling and you start to say, you know what, I shouldn't feel this way, guess what you're doing when you do that? You're giving those emotions power, okay? And so if you get all caught up saying, oh, you know what, I got to stop trying to feel this way, it's only going to get worse. Instead, you got to tell yourself this is normal. Everyone feels this when starting something that they haven't done before, and it's not going to go ahead and stop me. I'm not going to let it stop me. I'm going to go ahead and keep on pushing through anyway. And then also, as you go ahead and really work on that, you can work on your becoming journal to become someone who can push through despite how you feel as well. And so normal human emotions that every single person feels, you got to become the type of person who doesn't let those completely normal feelings stop you. This is the type of person that winner students are. Again, I'm going ahead and mentioning this because it is very important, because this is about to go from 0 to 100 miles an hour. And it's very important to go ahead and prime your mind to this, okay, as you go ahead and get into these topics around legal, finance, and accounting. And then the other point I want to go ahead and mention here is that if any of what it is that we're about to talk about goes over your head completely, do not worry, that is fine. Why? Because at your current level of income and where you are right now, okay, most of what it is that you need is just, hey, I just got to be familiar with it. Okay, that's it. You just got to be familiar with the terms. That's it. Don't worry, there is no test here, there is no exam, there is no grades, there is no A, B, C, D, E, F, G, okay? This training is going to be here for you as a reference for a long time to come. And on top of that, when you start to get to the point where you're making $5,000 to $10,000 in income in your business, that's when you can actually start focusing on taking taxes more seriously, because 30% of $0 is, guess what? Still $0, okay? And then the beautiful thing is that when you get to that point, what's going to happen is that we're going to have an entire module that is going to further give you even more repetition and even more exploration around these topics, so that way you can actually become an expert on these topics. So don't worry if it goes over your head. Don't worry, okay? Now, having said that, some students at that point, hearing what it is that I just said, say, okay, cool. Does that mean that I can just go ahead and skip around? Does that mean that I don't really need to know this stuff? Or some students might also say, hey, why can't I just let the lawyers and the accountants deal with this stuff, right? It's not my job to know any of this, right? And the answer to that question is, who in the world is saying that you have to have a PhD, CPA in any of this? No one. In this training, what we're going to be going over is the basic fundamental foundations in legal, finance, and accounting. Maybe you've heard of the phrase before. It's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. And so wouldn't it be smart for you to be at least somewhat familiar with what the heck those tax or legal professionals are saying to you, so that way you have a general knowledge and understanding of what it is happening? Of course it is. And so just because you may not have been exposed to these topics in the past, and even though it might feel confusing and overwhelming for you at first, does not mean that it is quote unquote not important. In fact, it's probably one of the most important topics for you to be at least familiar with, so that way you don't get lost and confused as you go ahead and start working hard to be able to build your online income around these topics. Got it? All a very, very, very important pre-frame, because guess what? We're about to go ahead and crank this up and really get into this, okay? So now that we have an overall understanding of the legal entities, both in the US and Canada in general, it's time to now go ahead and get into some foundational understandings of legal, finances, and accounting. And we're gonna go ahead and talk about the four main foundational understandings, okay? So if we are on the same page with these four understandings, then the rest of this entire training is gonna make sense. We're gonna go ahead and talk about four things. Number one, we're gonna go ahead and talk about the LLC tax election confusion. We're going to go ahead and talk about the three main taxes that exist. We're going to go ahead and talk about tax write-offs and explaining exactly what those are, exactly how they work, and whether or not they allow you to get free stuff or not. And then understanding number four is we're going to go ahead and talk about what we are going to be focusing on specifically inside of this training. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about understanding number one, which is the LLC tax election confusion. Are you ready? Let's go ahead and talk about this, because this is the number one biggest, most confusing thing in the entire US and legal tax system. Okay, so if you even just understand 10% of what it is that we're about to talk about, you are going to be golden, because what you got to understand is something called LLC tax election and all of the confusion that comes around that. Because out of all of the different types of legal entities that exist, an LLC is actually one of the newer ones. It's only been around for about 35 years, and it's only been popular in the last 20 years, okay? And so the LLC was created to be a flexible entity that would allow for more tax saving options than the C Corp, okay? And it would be easier to set up than the S Corp, okay? And so today, the LLC is by far the most popular choice for new businesses, holding companies, real estate companies, and all other types of business ventures. But because the LLC is a flexible legal entity, it has some special superpowers that are also very confusing. And that's exactly what we're going to go ahead and talk about right now. Because the superpower that makes the LLC so flexible is also the reason why so many people, whether they are beginners or not, are also confused about how an LLC works. Because although the LLC works just like any other corporation for the purposes of legal protection, it has a lot more flexibility in terms of how it's taxed. And the reason for that being is because an LLC can actually choose to be taxed in pretty much almost any way that it wants. And so really, when that occurs, there's not just one type of LLC. What ends up happening is that for the purposes of taxes specifically, you can almost imagine that there are three types of LLCs. Okay, so we have our US legal entities, sole prop, partnership, LLC, S Corp, C Corp, okay? But for the purposes of taxation, an LLC actually has three different kind of elections, right? So there's a standard LLC that has no tax election. There's an LLC with an S Corp tax election. And then there's an LLC with a C Corp tax selection. See, I wasn't joking. It starts to get a little bit more complicated, but don't worry, we're going to make this super, super simple for you, okay? So when an LLC is first started, it is a standard LLC, and it is taxed the same way a sole prop or a partnership is, depending on how many people are inside of that LLC. And then the LLC can choose to be taxed. It's called a different tax structure, a different tax selection. It can choose to be taxed as an S Corp or a C Corp, and we're going to talk more about that as well, okay? So this is what we call the tax election, right? That's what it means. It's choosing, it's electing to be taxed in a different way. And so this is the reason why an LLC is so confusing for so many people, because although legally an LLC is a corporation, for the purposes of tax, it might actually be one of these other three kind of taxation elections, right? So it's kind of like a chameleon. Your LLC can be converted into a different type of entity. Now, the question you might be having right now is, well, why the heck is any of this even helpful, right? Like, this is all theoretical, mojo jojo stuff. Like, why does any of this even matter, right? The reason why this matters is that when you first start out, you might not know how much money you will make in a year, right? It's typical, right? You're starting something new. It's normal, right? And so what ends up happening is that you might not want to start off being an S Corp or a C Corp because there are additional fees that come along with that, right? You're a corporation, like a legit corporation. There's additional fees and filings and all that kind of stuff, right? And so what you might decide to do is you might end up starting the year off as a standard LLC, and you just say, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and see how things go. And then as the year progresses, right? If you end up doing really well, usually more than like $75,000, $100,000 a year in revenue, then you might decide, you know what? I want to go ahead and save taxes, and I'm going to go ahead and elect for becoming an S Corp or an S Corp tax selection. So even though I'm still an LLC, I'm going to be able to go ahead and elect to be taxed as an S Corp, okay? And so no other legal entity allows you to be able to just transform how you are going to be taxed right in the middle of the year. And so visually, this is what it looks like, right? With all of the other entities, once you are that entity, you're pretty much locked in, but not with the LLC, okay? You can actually choose to be taxed differently. It's called a retroactive S election, and this is what it looks like visually. You start off the year, you're like, you know what? I'm going to be a standard LLC. I got no tax election. I'm going to be taxed as a sole prop, okay? And then as you're going on in the year, like, oh, dang, things are going really, really well. Okay. And now I've gotten, $75,000, $100,000 in revenue. But guess what? In a normal standard LLC, there are no tax savings. And so now in the middle of the year and the end of the year, I'm going to go ahead and retroactively get that S Corp tax election. So that way I can save taxes as an S Corp. And so we might decide, you know what? After hitting $75,000 to $100,000, I might want to be taxed as an S Corp. And so just because of that, I'm not going to go into the details of this. Again, you just have to be familiar with this. Don't worry if this doesn't 100% make sense to you why all of this happens. Just understand that this exists, period, right? And so I'm not going to go over the details and the numbers and all that kind of stuff for this. But what you got to know is that compared to a standard LLC, a LLC with an S Corp tax election might end up saving $7,500 a year in additional taxes based off of $100,000 in revenue, okay? And so that's why the LLC is such a confusing legal entity, is because it can be taxed in multiple different ways, right? So with an LLC, you get the best of all worlds, and this is why the LLC is such a great corporate structure, because it is so flexible. But also the reason why it has those superpowers is the same reason why it's so confusing for so many people. Because when it comes to liability, which is the left side of this diagram right here, when it comes to liability, the LLC acts like a corporation. But when it comes to taxes, the LLC has multiple different types, and it might be taxed as an unincorporated. It might have one tax return, right? It might be taxed as sole prop, or it might be taxed as a separate corporation, right? And so that's what makes it confusing, because you got all these different types compared to when it's, hey, is it for liability purposes? Is it for tax purposes? It is flexible depending on what it is that you are talking about. Man, oh man. I know, right? It's confusing as heck, and it takes a lot of repetition to eventually one day understand. Remember, skill equals knowledge times reps. It will take 10, 20 reps of you being exposed to this LLC tax selection confusion to really wrap your head around it, okay? And so the good news is that at your current level of income in your business, it's not something that you have to be really an expert in. Again, remember, all I'm doing is we're exposing you to these ideas so that way you are familiar with the fact that they even exist. You don't necessarily necessarily have to understand, hey, what form do I have to file? Or, hey, how do I actually do it? Or why does that actually exist? Or what is the legality around it? And all those other details, right? Right now, you just want to know that this is how this game is played when it comes to the LLC. And then later on in the income and business training, once you are actually making $5,000 to $10,000 a month consistently in your online income, we'll be able to walk you through how to be able to save the taxes on that when we talk about the game of accounting, legal, and finance, and the game of taxes in general, okay? So that is the first foundational understanding that I wanted to go ahead and walk you through that was very important to understand so the rest of this entire training makes sense is number one, the LLC tax selection confusion. We already went ahead and talked about that. What was the LLC tax selection confusion? It was that when it comes to taxes, an LLC can actually be three different types of entities or tax selections, okay? Now, let's go ahead and go over to understanding number two, which is the three main taxes. This is very important. The second foundational understanding that you need to have is that in the US, there are only three main taxes, okay? Tax number one is Social Security and Medicare tax, also known as FICA tax. Tax number two is federal income tax. And then tax number three is state income tax. Okay, so this is what it looks like visually. All right, so we have Social Security, Medicare, FICA tax, federal income tax, and then state income tax with a little star there. We'll talk about why that star is there right now, okay? So first off, Social Security and Medicare tax. Okay, so Social Security and Medicare tax, this is like, hey, if you have a W-2 day job, this is what we call Social Security and Medicare tax, in which you pay 7.65%. However, if you are the owner of a business and you take a salary income as an employee in your own business, then we go ahead and call this self-employment tax, and you pay 15.3%. Don't worry, we're going to talk more about this later on inside of this training, okay? That's the first main tax. The second main tax after that is federal income tax. This is the federal income tax that you pay according to the tax bracket that goes to the federal government, right? This is paid to the IRS on the income that you generated in that year. And then finally, we have state income tax. This is the state income tax bracket that you pay to your state government, okay? It doesn't go to your federal government, it goes to the state government based on the income that you generated in the previous year. Now, there are only 8 US states that have no corporate income tax, okay? Alaska, Wyoming, Washington, Texas, Tennessee, South Dakota, Nevada, Florida. The rest of the 42 US states do have some sort of corporate state income tax. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put an asterisk on this as well because there's sometimes like gross receipts tax and franchise tax and all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, these 8 states don't have corporate income tax, okay? Now, there are exceptions, like I said, in certain states in which businesses might have to pay other taxes, but I'm not going to go into that right now, okay? And so that's why we went ahead and talked about state income tax the way that we did. And so if we look at it, how this entire tax system works is that in your business, you go ahead and generate X amount of revenue in the entire year. And then after that, you're going to go ahead and have all of your business expenses and all of your write-offs that are subtracted from your revenue. From there, you go ahead and have pre-tax earnings, which is your earnings before tax, which is your revenue minus your expenses. And then out of that, all of your taxes are going to come out, okay? Your FICA tax, your federal income tax, and then your state income tax, if that applies to you in the state that you live in, okay? Typically, your FICA tax, which is your Social Security and Medicare tax, and your federal income tax is going to add up to a percentage between 25 and 35%. And then you're going to further take out your state income tax from there. And then finally, that goes ahead and has your net profit or your net income for that entire year. Okay, now remember, this is just a general understanding of how the tax system works. Obviously, you don't want to plan your taxes based off of this diagram, but just giving you an idea of what the breakdown might look like. And so that way you have an idea, a mental model, a framework to be able to understand how this entire system works. Okay, so that is the second main understanding that we wanted to go ahead and talk about for you to understand that there are 3 main taxes and exactly what that looks like. Now we're going to go ahead and go into understanding number 3, which is foundational, which is tax write-offs, and explaining exactly what those are. Okay, so a tax write-off is any business expense that is allowed by the IRS for the purposes of lowering taxable income. Okay, so a tax write-off is also known as a business or a tax deduction. Okay, so basically anything that is purchased by your business in the course of running a business to try and make a profit can be deducted from your taxes. Now, a star there is that anything refers here to anything that is allowed by the IRS. Okay, so there are rules around this. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to go ahead and buy my groceries with my business and all of a sudden that's going to be a tax deduction. There are rules around this, okay? And so if you've ever heard any business owner boast like, yeah, I got a tax deduction around this. This is typically what it is that they are talking about. Now, this is something that is an extremely, extremely important point to understand around this, which is that some students at this point start to realize, oh, cool, I understand tax deductions, right? So whatever I buy for the purpose of my business, I basically get for free, right? And so that means that if I buy a new computer for $3,000, right, with my business, for my business, even though I might not actually need it, right? Let's say, for example, I have a brand new computer already, but you know what, for the sake of example, right, I wanted to go ahead and buy this computer for $3,000, even though I might not need the $3,000 computer, it's basically free, right? Because I saved $3,000 from my taxes. Is that how it works? Now, here's the thing. This is such a common misunderstanding. I myself, for the first few years of being a beginner business owner, thought that this is how it worked. And then one day I did the numbers and I had a shocking realization. And that's what I want to walk you through right now so you can understand exactly how tax deductions work. So that way you don't end up making these same mistakes as well. Okay, so for the purposes of this example, let's assume that your business made $100,000 in revenue in a year. Okay, and then in terms of the business expenses, obviously this is not a realistic example, but let's just assume that the only expense that you had in the entire year was the $3,000 computer. And then in this other example here, let's just assume that there was no expenses in the entire year. Okay, so this is just a hypothetical example. And so in this example, right, revenue minus the expenses on the left side here, 100,000 minus 3,000 equals $97,000 is the earnings before tax. And then in terms of the tax rate, let's just assume that there's no state income tax. And let's just assume that the FICA and the federal income tax was at 30%. Again, just as an example, okay? Anywhere between 25 to 35% theoretically, okay? So then at that point, 97,000 times 30% tax rate means that we got to pay $29,100 in taxes for the year, okay? And so that means that our net profit, our net income for the year is $67,900, okay? So that is with us buying the $3,000 computer, and that is with us having that as a write-off. Now let's go ahead and look at the right side. And let's go ahead and say we didn't buy the computer and we didn't get the $3,000 write-off, right? And so we got $100,000 in revenue, no expenses. And so our earnings before tax are 100,000. Okay. And then we're going to have the same tax rate. And so 30% of 100,000 means we're going to pay $30,000 in taxes. And so that means that our net income at the end of the year was 70,000. And so you will notice that the computer actually did cost us money because the computer and the expense of the computer is not coming off of the taxes, right? It's not coming off of 29,100 and then minus 3,000. It's coming off of our revenue, right? And so the $3,000 computer still cost us $2,100, right? So yes, we saved 30%, and you're going to see why that is here in just a second, but it still cost us money. And so what does that mean? It means that yes, if you have a business write-off that is legit by the IRS, right, you are going to save money, but you're not going to save 100% of that money. You're going to save whatever your tax rate is on that item. So for example, if your tax rate, right, in this example was 30%, if your tax rate is 30%, then you're going to basically get whatever that business expense is with 30% off, okay? But does that mean that whatever that item was free because it came out of my taxes? No, right? And this is what people don't understand. They think, oh, if I buy a $3,000 item, and then it's a tax deduction, it's going to come out of my taxes. That's not how it works. It lowers your taxable income. It doesn't lower your actual taxes, okay? Because here's the thing. If you have to pay 70% of something that you didn't need, right? Let's say that computer wasn't something that you needed, right? It's still a waste because you're spending 70% of the money on something that you didn't need, regardless of if you're spending $3,000, which is no business write-off, on the computer, or $2,100 on the computer if it is a business write-off. You're still spending $2,100 on something that you didn't need, right? And so that's why it's not like, hey, let me just spend this money because it's going to lower my taxes. You're still spending money. Like you're still losing money if you buy things that you don't need, right? But what that does mean is that if it is something that you do need for the sake of the business, then absolutely you want to make sure that you make it a point to purchase it through the business because you save 30% or whatever your tax rate is, just as an example, 30%, right? Because of the fact that it is a business expense and you get to write it off. And so basically you get a 30% discount sale or whatever your tax rate is on pretty much anything that you need for the business purposes. Pretty cool, right? Now you might say, cool, well, how is this useful? Like, what are some of the business expenses that I can write off and get a 30% discount on, right? Again, whatever your tax rate is what we're talking about here, right? So things that would be included in tax write-offs, things like office supplies, pens, papers, desks, standing desk if you wanted to have, right? Webcam, headphones, computer, mic, mouse, keyboard, education, courses, coaching programs, books, audiobooks, right? Your investment in this program is write-offable, okay? Softwares, Google domains, Zoom, any professional, legal, accounting, bookkeeping services, right? Advertising, all ad costs are tax deductible, meaning you're going to be able to save on them. Home office expenses, right? You can write off a percentage of your phone, internet, electricity, rent, and so many more. Now, you're going to see that I skipped over this other topic right here around meals and car mileage. You got to be careful with this because this is a topic that is easily abused, especially for online income earners, right? If you're out there going ahead and, writing off your car mileage and you're an online income business, well, you're going to get audited because that doesn't make any sense. And so you got to be extremely careful and extremely ethical when you follow these rules. Otherwise, if and when you get audited, you're going to find yourself in a lot of trouble. And so that's why meals and car mileage are not two categories that I'm the biggest fan of, especially when you're starting out. You don't really understand how the difference between personal and business finances work or how to keep proper records or receipts of all of this stuff. And so you don't want to mess around with that. But all of the other things are very easily tax deductible for the purposes of business. Okay, so anything that you can think of that is an expense as a result of you running your business is probably tax deductible. You just want to make sure with the IRS website of what qualifies and make sure that you actually save the receipts. That's very important as well. Now, again, I want to go ahead and make this very, very clear. We are not saying that all of these things are free because it comes off of my taxes. What we're saying is that if these are things that you do in fact need, these are things that you are in fact going to be spending money on anyways, you might as well automatically get a pretty big discount, 25, 35% plus, if you just go ahead and make it a business expense rather than spending that money from your personal expenses or from your personal finances, maybe from your W-2 or, other sources of income. Okay. Now, if this doesn't make sense, make sure that you go ahead and go back over to the example and study that. So that way you can understand how business write-offs actually work. Okay. And again, if any of this went over your head, just listen to this a bunch of times, do your own research, and I promise you, eventually it will click. Skill equals knowledge times reps. But this is the understanding and the explanation of business write-offs and tax deductions that we wish we would have received when we first started. Nobody broke it down in as simple terms so that we could actually understand what business write-offs are and how exactly they make sense. Beautiful. Now, having said that, that is foundational understanding number 3, which was understanding how tax write-offs work and explaining all of that. Now we're going to go ahead and get into foundational understanding number 4, which is all about what we are going to be focusing on. Okay, so the fourth and final critical understanding is for you and I to be on the same page about which of the legal entities that we're going to be focusing on inside of this training. Because even though we could talk about all of the legal entities that exist, it would not be practical for 99% of the situations of RWA students, okay? And so what we're going to go ahead and do is I'm going to walk you through the visual that we're going to be using throughout this entire training, okay? What we're going to do is throughout this entire training, we're going to go ahead and talk about these topics from 2 parts. We're going to talk about it from the liability side, and we're going to go ahead and talk about it from the taxes side, okay? Now, on these 2 parts, on the liability side, we are only going to be talking about sole prop and LLC, okay? We are not going to be talking about partnership. We're not going to be talking about S Corp, and we are not going to be talking about C Corp, okay? In general, you're going to get a good understanding of how they work. For the most part, though, we're going to talk about sole prop and LLC, okay? And then on the taxes side, we're going to go ahead and talk about the sole prop. We're going to go ahead and talk about the standard LLC with the no tax election. And then we're going to go ahead and talk about the LLC with the S Corp tax election. Okay. Now, if you're confused about why there are 2 LLCs on the tax side, make sure you go ahead and refer to the LLC tax election confusion, understanding that we went ahead and talked about earlier. Okay. Now, you might have a question. Why not talk about the others, right? Why are the other ones grayed out? The reason why it doesn't make sense for us to talk about partnerships or S Corps or C Corps is because, number one, partnerships are not going to be applicable to most of the students inside of this program. And then in general, there are more tax effective ways to structure partnerships using LLCs. So that's not something that's relevant for this conversation, okay? And then S Corps, because of the fact that an LLC can be taxed as an S Corp, we don't really even need to talk about an S Corp, right? So you'll see on here, an LLC can be taxed as an S Corp, so there's no reason for us to talk about S Corps. And an LLC can be taxed as a C Corp, so there's no reason for us to talk about C Corps either. And then on top of that, C Corps are usually mainly there for bigger companies that have like board of directors and stock market companies and that kind of stuff. And so what that means is that from this point going forward, we are not going to be talking about partnerships, we are not going to be talking about S Corps, and we are not going to be talking about C Corps. The only entities that we're going to talk about are the sole prop and the LLC on the liability side, and on the taxes side, we're going to talk about the sole prop, the standard LLC, and the LLC with S Corp tax election. Okay. And so with that being said, that is what we talked about when we talk about the four main foundational understandings that we wanted to get on the same page with in order to understand exactly what it is that we're going to talk about inside of this training. Okay. So if you understand these four foundational pieces, then everything else inside of this training is going to be so much easier. Otherwise, we're going to have to explain the entire tax and legal system. And that is now like a multi-seminar like event, right? So that's talking about like this training already is quite extensive by itself. We don't have to try and dive into the entire tax and legal system by itself. Okay, so now that we've gone ahead and finished going over the four main foundational understandings, now we can go ahead and actually talk about each of the main parts that are going to be relevant to you. And so the very first one that we're going to go ahead and talk about is the sole prop. Okay, the sole prop is the first legal entity that you need to understand in order to be able to do business. Okay, sometimes it's called a sole proprietorship, sometimes it's called a sole prop for short. Okay, so what we're talking about with our diagram here is that here on the left side for liability purposes and here on the right side for tax purposes. Okay, so the sole prop means sole means one and proprietor means owner of a business. So literally a sole prop is a one man or one woman business. Okay, so what most people don't know is that in order to open or become a sole prop, right, there is actually no paperwork or anything required. The government actually makes it very, very easy to become a sole prop. How? Well, they make it so easy that literally everybody is a sole prop by default, okay? As soon as you generate a single dollar in any way, shape, or form outside of your normal 9-to-5 W-2 job, congratulations. You're now a sole prop. There are no fees, there are no startup costs, there is no formal process. You can literally sign up a customer, a client, a student today and start making money and get business deductions and write-offs right this second without even having to register or anything like that. And it's fully encouraged by the government. It's completely legal. Coach Yasin, what are you saying? Yes, you heard me. Everyone has made it so complicated, and probably because lawyers and accountants want to make money when you're confused, everyone thinks that they have to register their business when in reality, governments have made it extremely, extremely easy for you to be able to go ahead and start your business and start making income, okay? You can literally go out and even open a bank account, a business bank account right now just by using your social security number and have a business up and running. Yep, you heard me right. You can even go and open a business bank account as a sole prop. Just by using your social security number, you can go ahead and open that up, and then you can go ahead and start keeping your business revenue and your business expenses separate from your personal income and your personal expenses. And then not only that, you can also go ahead and get business deductions as a sole prop. Also, remember all of those tax deductions that we talked about earlier? All of that stuff that we said that you could save whatever your tax rate was on, right? Pretty much anything that you purchase for the purposes of your business, you can get that as a deduction. Yep, just as a sole prop, you can get all of those things deducted from your taxable income as well. Things like office supplies, office equipment, education, software, professional services, advertising, a percentage of your home office expense. All of that is deductible just by you being a sole prop. Now, some students might be like, wait a second. This kind of feels like a trick. Like, why would the IRS, why would the government allow all of this without even having to register? And the answer to that question is because the government actually wants you to report all of your income. Because if the government put in place fees and registration in order for you to be able to make money outside of your normal day job, your W-2 job, then people would still go out there and make money because obviously they have to make money, right? But then when it came time for tax time, right, at the end of the year, they wouldn't report that income because they had to be registered or they had to pay a fee or whatever like that, right? And so instead, the government has created the lowest barrier to making money outside of your W-2 day job, so that way you don't feel bad to report everything that you've made. What is that lowest barrier? Nothing. So the government actually wants you to go out and make money and report it because guess what? That's how they increase their taxes, right? And so then when tax time comes, because there is no fee or registration process, you're able to go ahead and report all of your income that you made from your side business or your side income and all that kind of stuff very, very easily. And so when you compare this to a traditional corporation, to an LLC, this is what the table and the comparison looks like so far. And right now, based off of what it is that we're looking at, a sole prop looks so much better and so much more attractive than an LLC, right? Because a sole prop is unincorporated, so it's pretty much either free or very nominal in order to get started, okay? Versus an LLC, you're gonna have to spend in state filing fees. It's not even talking about lawyers or accounting fees, right? I'm just talking about state filing fees, right? The fees that you're going to pay to the state, $300 to $800 per year, right? But then the thing is that with a sole prop, you can open a business bank account, you can get tax write-offs. And so why in the world would anyone say, you know what, I'm gonna pay $300 or $800 to my state and be able to open up an LLC when I can do this for free over here and do the exact same things with everything else as well? Well, my friend, that is a phenomenal question. And that's exactly what we're going to go ahead and talk about right now. Why even register for a corporation, right? Because if a sole prop is pretty much free to set up, I can open a business bank account with it. I can get tax deductions and write-offs, which is tax saving bucket number one. Why even register for a dang corporation, right? I have to even pay money out of pocket to register a corporation. Why would I do that, right? If I can do all the same things with the sole prop. Well, there are two main reasons why corporations are useful. Reason number one is protection and liability. And reason number two is tax saving bucket number two. So let's go ahead and talk about each of those right now. Okay, we're going to go ahead and talk about them. And number one is going to be protection and liability. This is the first big reason why people spend the time and the money to register and open a corporation, is that it protects you legally from liability. Why? Because a corporation, in the eyes of the law, is seen as a separate entity, meaning that it's kind of like a separate person. A corporation even gets their equivalent of their own social security number called an EIN, an employer identification number, from the IRS, so that way they are officially registered. They are officially separate from you, okay? And so when we talk about the separation in terms of liability, this is what it looks like visually. In an unincorporated entity, like a sole prop, there is no separation between you and your personal assets and the personal assets and the debts of the business, right? There is no separation. You are the business, okay? There is no separation for liability. Versus in a corporation entity, your personal assets and your personal debts are separate from the business assets and the business debts. And so this is what it looks like, right? There's a separation between the two versus in an unincorporated entity. There is no separation between the two there, okay? And so this is what we're talking about here, is that in a sole prop, even though it does not require for you to register, you can basically set it up for free. You can still open a business bank account. You can still go ahead and have business tax write-offs, right? What it is that you are still considered liable for anything that happens in the business, right? Because what we're talking about is the left side of this diagram, right? You said this is the diagram that we're going to go ahead and follow through. This is what we're talking about on the left side of this diagram, right? A sole proprietorship, right, is an unincorporated entity in which there is no separation from the liability. And so what that means is that if you get sued on the business side, they can come after your personal assets. And if you get sued on the personal side, they can come after your business assets. And so this is the first reason why a corporation is so beneficial, even though it does cost time and money and attention and all that kind of stuff in order to incorporate. It provides that protection in liability to be able to separate between personal and business in terms of liability, assets, debts, and all of that kind of stuff. So now if we start to actually look at our table, what you're going to start to notice is that compared to an LLC, okay, now it's starting to make sense. Even though it's pretty much free here, I can still open a business bank account, I still get business write-offs, all of that kind of stuff. Why would I pay the money in order to actually do it? Is because of the fact that I'm getting that liability and that protection, okay? But what else? What is the other main benefit, right? We've talked about protection. Let's go ahead and talk about tax saving bucket number two, okay? The second big reason why people spend the money to register and open a corporation is to save on taxes using tax saving bucket number two, which is saving on self-employment tax, okay? So just as a reminder, in our diagram, we're now not focusing on the liability side. We're going to be focusing on the right side of this diagram, which is the taxes side, okay? So we have this line right here. And we have two types. We have entities in which there is one tax return filed, and then we have entities in which there are two tax returns filed. Okay, so the reason why people start and open corporations is to save on self-employment tax. Now, the question is, what is self-employment tax? Self-employment tax is the percentage of your taxes that is paid towards Social Security and Medicare. So remember what we talked about, the three main types of taxes, right? Visually, we said this is what it looks like. You have your Social Security and Medicare tax, also known as your FICA tax. You have your federal income tax, and you have your state income tax, right? Now, somebody might say, oh, Coach Yasin, Social Security, Medicare tax, I already pay that from my W-2 9-to-5 day job. I know exactly what that is. But here's the thing. It's kind of different as a business owner. Why? Because when you have a W-2 from your 9-to-5 day job, what happens is that your company actually pays for half of the Social Security and Medicare tax. Okay, let me walk you through what this exactly looks like. Okay, so Social Security tax is 12.4%, and in your W-2 day job, your company pays for 6.2%. You pay for 6.2%. Medicare tax is 2.9%. So you pay for 1.45%. Your company pays for 1.45%. And so visually, this is what it looks like. Okay. So on, let's say, for example, hypothetically, 75 grand in earnings before tax. Okay. You are going to be paying for 7.65% of that tax, and your company is going to pay for 7.65% of that tax. And this is what the breakdown looks like. And so in total, there is 15.3% being paid out for the purposes of Social Security and Medicare tax. That's the total amount. But what's happening is that your company is paying half and you are paying half, right? And so on 75 grand in income, just as an example, you might end up paying 7.65% of that, which would be around $5,700 in Social Security and Medicare tax. Okay, that's how it looks like on your W-2 9-to-5 day job. Well, here's a question. How does this then look when you actually have a sole prop or a standard LLC, right? Let's go ahead and talk about when you have one tax return, and let's go ahead and talk about this top section here, okay? This is where a sole prop and a standard LLC are at a disadvantage when it comes to Social Security and Medicare tax, aka FICA tax. Why? Because when you have a sole prop or a standard LLC, what happens is that you are both the employee and you are the employer, right? We're not talking about any other employees. We're talking about yourself being inside of the company, okay? And so what happens is that you actually end up having to pay because you now are the company, okay? This is funny how it works. You are now the company. So what ends up happening is that now you, out of your paycheck, have to pay 7.65%. And now because you are also the company, you also have to pay the other 7.65%. And so what happens is that now you're paying both sides of the equation, and now it's no longer called, company pays and you pay. It's called self-employment tax, and now you're paying both sides of the equation, which is 15.3%. And so if you ever hear anybody say, oh, there's self-employment tax, you just have to remember that yes, W-2 9-to-5 employees also pay kind of like self-employment tax, but what they're doing is they're paying half of it, right? And that's why it's not called self-employment tax. So self-employment tax is the term that they use when a self-employee has to go ahead and pay both sides of the equation. And so visually, if we actually look at what it looks like on here compared to the W-2 9-to-5 day job, where you were only paying 7.65% of your paycheck, where you're paying $5,700 approximately, now for a sole prop and a standard LLC on 75 grand in earnings before tax, and you're having to pay both sides, which is 15.3%, you're paying around $11,000, pretty much double what the W-2 9-to-5 day job person is paying, because you're having to pay both sides of the Social Security and Medicare tax. Now, just as a quick recap, some students at this point might be like, okay, Coach Yasin, I'm trying to stick with you here. Like, I'm kind of following. Can you remind me again? Why are we bundling the sole prop and the standard LLC again together? Like, why are both of these having to pay the same amount of taxes here? And the reason why is because remember the LLC tax selection confusion? When it comes to taxes, an LLC has two types. There is the standard LLC that does not have any tax selection. And then there is the S Corp tax selection LLC, right? When it comes to taxes. And so the standard LLC is actually taxed the same way that a sole prop is taxed, okay? For the purposes of liability, yes, an LLC is different than a sole prop, right? That we have this line here, but we're not talking about liability right now. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about taxes. And so for the purposes of taxes, a sole prop and a standard LLC are taxed exactly the same way, meaning a standard LLC does not save you on taxes. This is very important to understand. A standard LLC, yes, it goes ahead and saves you on liability here. That's why there's a big difference. But when it comes to taxes, if your LLC does not have a tax selection, it is taxed pretty much exactly the same way as a sole prop. And so the question comes in then is that, all right, well, does any of this help with the corporation, right? How does a corporation actually help us save taxes? Well, this is where the other tax selection for the LLC comes in, right? We're not talking about the standard LLC now. We're going to go ahead and talk about the LLC with S Corp tax selection, okay? Because what ends up happening with the S Corp tax selection is that with your LLC, you now tell the IRS, hey, I want to be taxed as an S Corp. And when you want to go ahead and get taxed as an S Corp, what happens is you can now actually divide your business profit into two categories. You can divide it into owner's distribution and employee salary income. Again, you don't have to know the details of it. What does that mean? All of that stuff. It's okay if this goes over your head. Remember, just get familiar with the terms and what we're talking about here, okay? And so what ends up happening is that when you are taxed as an S Corp, you can actually go ahead and divide that income up, and you only have to pay the self-employment tax. Remember all this self-employment tax, Social Security, and Medicare tax that was killing you over here at the sole prop and standard LLC level? What happens is that you only have to pay that self-employment tax on the actual employee salary income side. And then on the owner distribution side, there is no self-employment tax. And so what that means is that if you set this up properly and you do everything like this accordingly, you only have to then pay that 15.3%, the self-employment tax, on the employee salary income, which if you do the math ends up being about $3,800 in taxes. And so what ends up happening is that now you're paying less than the W-2 employee, and you're definitely absolutely paying less than the sole prop or the standard LLC, and you're saving about $7,500 in self-employment tax by actually structuring your business with that S Corp tax election. And so that is the reason why this other LLC election is so important, because when you convert your standard LLC, right? You have your standard LLC over here that only has one tax return. When you actually convert your standard LLC into an LLC with an S Corp tax selection, by telling the IRS that you want to be taxed as an S Corp, you save over $7,500 in self-employment taxes compared to if you were a sole prop or just a standard LLC without a tax selection. Now, again, I know I'm saying this a gazillion times. Remember, you do not have to 100% get everything that we are talking about here. You just want to review this training and get more reps, and eventually one day, I promise you, it will click for you. You do not need to memorize anything. You just need to understand the general concepts and how everything works, okay? Now, after you understand that, right? Now you understand, okay, this is the reason why people actually get LLCs, and this is the reason why people actually have an S Corp tax selection. All of that makes sense. You save a lot of money on self-employment tax. The question that you might have now is that why in the world would anyone decide to even have a standard LLC or a sole prop, right? Why doesn't everyone just automatically from the very beginning go and get an S Corp tax selection for their LLCs, right? The reason being is because when you start to separate your profits into those two categories, right? The owner distribution and the employee salary income from that previous diagram, when you actually start to separate your profit that way, you now have to pay yourself a payroll salary, and there's an additional cost that comes with that every single month. And then on top of that, when you actually get that S Corp tax selection, you now have to file a separate tax return for your business. You actually have to go ahead, and now you're not only going ahead and having that standard LLC, or you're not having that sole prop on those two entities or those two kind of tax types. There's only one tax return. There is no separation in taxes. So you only have to worry about your own personal tax return. But now all of a sudden, when you get that S Corp tax selection, there is that separation for tax purposes, right? We talked about separation for liability. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about separation for tax purposes. And so now you have to have even more expense, because now you are going ahead and filing another tax return, right? A whole different form, a whole different tax return that has to happen. And so what happens is that there are all these extra fees when you actually decide to convert your standard LLC into an LLC with an S Corp tax election, right? When you actually do that, there's going to be these fees that are going to offset any tax advantages that are going to happen, right? And so there's a specific revenue amount That makes sense, right? If you're making $100,000, then you're going to save $7,500 and you're like, okay, hey, if I save $7,500, it's worth for me to pay a couple $100 extra in fees and have to pay maybe another $1,000 to get a business tax return done because I'm saving freaking $7,500 in taxes, right? But here's the thing, below a certain threshold, if you're doing below $50,000 to $100,000 in yearly earnings, the extra fees just are not worth the extra tax savings, right? But in that previous example that we talked about, with $100,000 in revenue, you're saving $7,500 in taxes. You're like, heck yeah, it's totally worth it for me to go ahead and get that S Corp tax election, even though I am going to go ahead and have to pay payroll expenses, and even though I am going to go ahead and have an S Corp business tax return. It's worth it for me because of the fact that the costs are going to go ahead and justify that, right? And so this is the reason why not everyone immediately goes ahead and opens an LLC and then immediately files for an S Corp tax election, because of the fact that there are those additional fees. And so for the vast majority of people, when you first start out, if you don't have enough income coming in, typically around $50,000 to $100,000 a year in annual revenue, you're typically going to stay either at that sole prop or at that standard LLC level. And then once you actually run the numbers and say, you know what, it actually makes more sense for me to go ahead and get that S Corp tax election, it is only at that point does that person go ahead and get that S Corp tax election for their LLC. Man, oh man, oh man. Whew. This was pretty intense, right? I know, right? I promise you, the more you get exposed to this over time with multiple repetition, it will become easier, okay? Just like the first time you got exposed to maybe riding a bike or driving a car, there were a lot of things to remember, right? It felt like your brain was having to work overtime in order to remember all the small things, right? And now you do them effortlessly, right? And so this is a skill to be able to keep up because your exposure to these things have not been that much. And skill equals knowledge times reps. With enough repetition, I promise you will also get a hang of this over time. And the best part is that for your current level of income as a beginner, you do not have to be a master of this stuff at all. And then once you start to get to that $5,000 to $10,000 a month consistently, about $50,000 to $100,000 a year in annual income, in annual revenue that's coming in, then we're going to teach you how to become an absolute ninja in the upcoming module, so that way you can go ahead and save on taxes there as well. All right. And so the big thing to know as we go ahead and proceed with this training is that those are the two big reasons why corporations are so useful, is because they help on the liability side, right? They go ahead and have that protection and that separation for the purposes of liability. And then they also help on the taxes side. So that way, hey, you know what? Maybe you file for that standard LLC, right? Maybe it doesn't save you on taxes yet, but then you can go ahead and retroactively convert that with that S Corp election, that you wouldn't be able to do that as a sole prop. And then on the taxes side, it goes ahead and helps you save at a certain income point. Converting your standard LLC into an S Corp tax election saves you on that self-employment tax, right? So in the beginning, an LLC on the taxes side is not going to save you any money, but then you can retroactively convert that into the S Corp tax election and then start saving a lot of money on that self-employment tax as well on that side. Okay, so those are the two big reasons why corporations are so helpful and so useful, so that way you are completely aware of that, okay? And so now, as we start to transition into the second part of this training, I really want to go ahead and make it clear that everything we've talked about so far was absolutely foundational, but in my opinion, it was a lot more theoretical than I would have liked to make it. Yes, it was foundational. Yes, it was important. But now let's go ahead and actually take the time to make this practical for your situation now that you understand behind the scenes of how all of this works, okay? But first, let's go ahead and do a pulse check, okay? I want to make sure, how you doing so far? Remember, you can go through this training at 1.5 or 2x speed. Make sure you can use the speed settings, right? This is the beauty of e-learning, is that you can go ahead and take a break if you need it. You do not have to go through this entire training in one sitting. And remember, hey, we're just planting these seeds for the future. You don't have to go ahead and memorize or know all the details. Just make sure that you keep on going through this training as much as possible. So sit back, look away from the computer, take that break. Feel free to stand around if you need it, right before we actually get into the next part of this training. All right, welcome back from your quick break. Let's go ahead and now get into the actual practical piece, right? We've gone ahead and gone over the theoretical, we've gone over the foundational, you kind of have a general understanding and a gist of how this works. Let's go ahead and talk about what matters to you right now, okay? Because now that you have an understanding of how this works, it's time to go ahead and make this practical, so that way you can go ahead and make a decision of what it is that you need to do, okay? And here's the thing. we realize that many of you are just starting out and you're trying to do things as efficiently and as cheaply as possible. Now, don't worry, we were the exact same way when we got started too, right? When we first started, we were trying to do things as cheap and as easy as possible. And so what we've done is we've gone ahead and broken this down to make this as easy as possible in this training. So there's no excuse that anyone has that they got stuck or that they couldn't actually get set up properly, okay? And so because everyone's situation is different, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and provide our best in general information on the different paths that exist, so that way you can actually do this properly. And so here is what an example of thinking through this entire process of being a sole prop or an LLC might actually look like, right? First, you might have the thought and say, you know what, right now, I don't really want to have to deal with any of this. I'm just learning. I'm just testing, I'm just practicing, right? And for the next 6 months, I don't plan on getting any paid students right now, right? I'm only going to be working with practice students. There's going to be no money exchanging hands. And so in this case, I'm good. There's nothing that I need to do, right? I'm just going to go out there and have fun. I don't need an LLC. I don't need a bank account. There's nothing needed. I'm just going to become like a normal sole prop, but there's going to be no business being transacted. So I'm not really even a sole prop. I'm just kind of just a person practicing, right? That's the first kind of thought that you might have. Then the second thought from there that someone might have is, you know what? Sole prop, but opening a business bank account. So on second thought, you know what? I might actually want to bring in some paid students over the next few months. But here's the thing. I'm already a sole prop, right? By default, we talked about this already. There's no fees, there's no paperwork needed, right? I can just go ahead and start accepting money right now and get tax write-offs. You see now the reason why we had to talk about those foundational setup before this, because now all of this makes sense. Now we can go ahead and have a conversation around these topics and you understand the foundations, right? And then if you're a sole prop, when tax time comes, all you got to do is fill out an extra form with your accountant or on, TurboTax or whatever, Schedule C. You let the government know how much revenue you brought in and how many expenses, and it's as simple as that, right? But then here's the thing. The problem is that if I bring in even just one paid student, things are going to start to get messy with my personal bank account, because now I'm going to have business revenue in there. It's going to be mixed with my personal income and my expenses. And so even though I'm a sole prop, I might decide to go ahead and open up a business bank account, which I'm allowed to do, completely legal, right, with my social security number. And you know what? I might not need an LLC right now, because right now I'm only dabbling with a few students and my liability is pretty low, right? If I only have 1-2 students, right, my liability is very low. And I also don't think I'm going to get past $25,000 plus in the next year. So if that is the case, I might decide to just stay as a sole prop, but I might just open a business bank account to be able to kind of separate the finances from there, right? But then after that, the third thought that I might have is, but wait a second, you know what? Even if I am just getting started, right? Even if I do only have just a few students, what if I get sued or something like that, right? Well, if I'm a sole prop, I have unlimited liability because I am the business, right? There is no separation between me and the business. Exactly what we talked about earlier, right? You see now why the foundations were so important. I know they were lengthy, I know they're extensive, but now it would make sense to you why those foundations were so important, right? And so if I want to have more protection, even though I know it's going to cost me maybe $300 to $800 every single year for me to have my LLC, right? For me, it's worth it to go ahead and at least get a standard LLC, even though I know that it's not going to save me on taxes right now, but just the liability protection is enough for me to be able to justify the yearly cost in order to pay the state and all that kind of stuff, okay? That might be the third thought in terms of thinking through this process, right? I'm just kind of walking you through different thoughts that might happen depending on different situations, right? And then the fourth thought is like, you know what? Other than me being worried about getting sued or the liability, maybe I'm not that worried about that. But you know what? I like knowing that if I have a standard LLC, that if things go really well all of a sudden for me, right, in the year, and I start making between $5,000 or $10,000 per month, then what I can do is I can backdate and retroactively convert my standard LLC into an LLC with an S tax election, and I can save thousands on taxes if I get to that point. Now, I know I'm not really going to save on taxes until I'm at that $5,000 or $10,000, per month consistently, $50,000 to $100,000 a year. But you know what? I like knowing that I have that kind of quote unquote insurance, right? It's not insurance like we're talking about health insurance. No. We're talking about the insurance of being able to save on taxes, because you can go ahead and convert that LLC into that LLC with that S election. And so if that was my thought process, then in that case, it would make sense for me to say, you know what, let me just go ahead and get that LLC because it's worth it for me, right? And so you can see here that there are multiple different thought processes or thinking processes that you might have when you're actually thinking about this decision based off of all of the knowledge and the foundational understanding that we've gone ahead and gone through. And so So what we've done is we've taken all of this thinking and we've simplified it into 3 options for you, okay? So for the purposes of where you are right now as a remote wellness practitioner, most likely at your current level of income, in your business, there are 3 options, okay? Option number 1 is to basically be a sole prop with no business bank account, and then you evaluate. Option number 2 is to start a sole prop with a business bank account and then evaluate. And then option number 3 is to start an LLC and then file for S tax election once you hit $5,000 to $10,000 per month consistently. Now let's go ahead and dive into each of those 3 options so that way you can decide what is best for you. Okay, so option number 1 is basically no business bank account and you're a sole prop and then you evaluate. What are we talking about here? We're talking about no money is in the picture, right? You're just testing, you're just practicing, you're just exploring right now. And what your main focus is that you are looking for test and practice students or clients, and you are not looking for paid students right now. You're still in test or practice mode or learning mode for the next 6 to 12 months. Okay. So in this case, you're not really even like a sole prop because technically a sole prop is when money is transacted. So really we call it start a sole prop with no business bank account. But in this case, you're just somebody out there practicing to learn how to be better, right? That's all you are really, right? Now, why might you not do this option? The reason why you might not do this option is that as soon as there is any money that is coming in, right? As soon as money comes into the picture, this option becomes extremely messy because you don't have any separation of bank accounts between personal and business. And so that's why you wouldn't maybe do this option if this did not apply to you. What about option number 2? Let's go ahead and talk about option number 2, which is start sole prop with business bank account and then evaluate. Why might you actually decide on this option? Well, as soon as money comes in the picture, this is going to be very important to consider, right? And then at this point, if you're going with option number 2, you are ready to go ahead and focus on getting around 1 to 3 paid students. That is your primary focus. However, you're still dabbling and so you're only working towards 1 to 3 paid students in the next 12 months only, right? You're not trying to get 4 or 5 students. You don't think you're going to be able to get 4 or 5 students or clients, right? You're mainly working right now to get 1 to 3 paid students in the next 12 months. Now, why might you not do this option? The reason why you might not do this option is because as soon as you start getting more than 1 to 3 paid clients or paid students, and you plan on going towards getting 10 to 20 paid students, what happens is that your risk of audit goes up because once you start getting past $20,000 to $50,000 per year in annual income as a sole prop, the IRS is going to wonder, hey, why is this person not a corporation? And so therefore auditing gets a little bit finicky there, right? The second reason is that if you are planning to scale past $50,000 per year anyways, you might as well just get an LLC so that way you can save on the taxes. And then plus, when you go ahead and open up a business bank account, as a sole prop, you are actually going to go ahead and have to open up a different bank account for your LLC. And so if you're going to be scaling, and then you end up getting to $50,000 a year and you're like, oh, dang, now all of a sudden I got to go ahead and open up my LLC, but I already opened up this business bank account as a sole prop. Well, now it's annoying because now you got to go ahead and close out the business bank account with the sole prop, and then you got to go ahead and open up an LLC. And so if you're like, you know what, I'm already planning on getting 10 or 20 paid students. That's my main focus right now. Okay, this is what I'm working on, and I think I'm going to be able to do it with a high level of certainty. If that is the case, then you might as well just go ahead and open up an LLC because you're going to have to do that anyways because that's the direction and that's the trajectory that you're headed on. And then finally, you have option number 3. And with option number 3 is where you basically go ahead and start an LLC from the very beginning. And then you go ahead and file for that S tax election once you hit $50,000 to $100,000 a year in annual revenue, okay? And this might apply if you're like, you know what? I want the liability protection from the very beginning. I'm okay with spending $300 to $800 per year to get the LLC paperwork filed with the state and the filing fees and the renewal fees that come along with the state and all that kind of stuff. And I like knowing that if I scale past $5,000 to $10,000 per month consistently within the next year, that I can save more on self-employment tax with that S tax election, okay? That's some of the reasons why you might go with this option. Some of the reasons why you might not go with this option is that there is more paperwork and costs associated with this option compared to the sole prop, okay? And so if you plan on just dabbling with only 1 or 3 students max over the next 12 months, right? The liability risks are not going to be that severe because you only have like 1 or 3 customers, right? And so it might just not be worth it for you to deal with all of the extra costs if you're not going to have to deal with it based on your specific situation. So that's just a couple reasons why you might not want to go with this option, okay? So the biggest thing that you want to know is that as a summary, the reason why you open an LLC and you pay $300 to $800 a year, right? There's renewal fees and all that kind of stuff depending on your state is number 1 for liability protection, or to save on self-employment tax once you hit $5,000 to $10,000 a month consistently. And so visually, this is what these options look like. Okay, so you have option number one, which we said is sole prop with no business bank account, which again, we said is not really sole prop because there's no money being exchanged. So this is kind of like you just learning essentially, right? So there's like nothing you really need to do, just go out there and learn. And then option number two is you have a sole prop with a business bank account where your main focus is 1 to 3 paid students and not anything more than that over the next 12 months. And then option number three is to go ahead and open up a normal LLC, okay, where you just don't have a tax election. And then once you get to $50,000 to $100,000 in annual revenue, you go ahead and get that S Corp tax election because that's where you're actually going to start saving on taxes from there. And so those are the three options of what those look like visually. Now, just to go ahead and give you even more fuel so that way you can go ahead and make a decision on what route you want to go through, okay, what would we do in terms of scenarios, right? So if you're just testing and practicing, hey, just go out there. Don't worry about anything. Have fun, right? You don't really need to have a business bank account because you're not going to be transacting money, okay? I'm not going to read through all of these details on here, but you'll see no scenario number two, no previous business experience, limited funds, and you're doing this on the side. And your main focus right now is to just get 1 to 3 paid students over the next 12 months. Then you can go ahead and have a sole prop with a business bank account. And then after you've gotten 1 to 3 paid customers, you can go ahead and open up your LLC at that point. Again, read through the details of this in the actual guide. I'm not going to go line by line, but all of the details are in there. And then finally, scenarios 3, 4, and 5, if I had previous business experience and more funds, I was worried about liability and I had the funds. And then also that I was certain that I was going to get 1 to 3 paid students in the next 3 to 6 months and 10 plus paid students in the next 12 months, not test or practice students, then I would just go ahead and start off with the LLC. Okay, so in terms of a visual breakdown, this is what this looks like. All right. And so in the vast majority of the cases, starting off with just getting an LLC from the very beginning is going to be applicable in these scenarios. But then there are also scenarios depending on how serious you're taking this, whether you're dabbling, what are your other commitments, all of that is also an option on here. Now, in regards to Canadian students, it's pretty much the exact same decision, except instead of it being sole prop versus LLC, we're talking about sole prop versus CCPC. Okay. That's what we're talking about here. And so in this case, you're just like, you know what? I'm just dabbling right now. I'm not going to exchange money. If you're a Canadian student, then you're basically going to not worry about business bank account. You're going to stay as a sole prop, but you're not even a sole prop because there's no money being exchanged. And so you're just going to say, hey, cool, I'm just going to go ahead and practice. Nothing wrong with that. If you're like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and only focus on a couple students here and there. You can go ahead and become a sole prop with a business bank account, even in Canada. And then over here, if these other scenarios apply to you, that's when you might think of incorporating based off of the liability and based off of all of that kind of stuff there. Okay, so those are the 3 options and what those 3 options look like. And then what we're going to go ahead and do next is we're going to go ahead and walk you through all of the step-by-step instructions on how to actually open your legal entity. Okay, this is going to be very important. And this is going to be a little bit of a mini training in which we're going to go ahead and jump over to that and walk you through step by step on how to actually open your legal entity. So let's go ahead and cut over to that now. All right, welcome to this mini training about the step-by-step instructions of opening your legal entity. Let's go ahead and walk through each of the different options so you can go ahead and get this set up properly. So option number 1 is start a sole prop with no business bank account and then evaluate. Now, as we've already talked about inside of the main training, this is really not even a sole prop because technically a sole prop is that when $1 exchanges money, basically you become a sole prop, right? So the thing is that you technically already a sole prop, but because you're not going to be transacting any money, you don't need a business bank account, okay? So all you got to do is you just got to make sure that you are not dealing with any money coming in. Otherwise, it is extremely and strongly recommended to go with option number 2 and set up a business bank account so that way you can keep your personal and business money separate, okay? And so if you think that you are going to be dealing with a lot of money coming in or going out of the business, then it is strongly also recommended to consider getting an LLC if you're worried about liability or you're going to be doing over $25,000 a year in revenue. Okay, so this option is, like I said, inside of the main training, only there if you are dabbling, you're learning, and then you're like, you know what, I'm not going to exchange money right now. I'm just going to go ahead and have practice students and test clients and all of that kind of stuff. Okay, so as long as you're not dealing with money, other than that, go out there, learn, explore, get some test and practice students and have fun. Okay, so that is option number 1 if you fall into that boat. Okay, option number 2 after that is now to go ahead and start a sole prop with a business bank account. Okay, so if you've decided to go down this route, then there is no quote unquote legal entity that you need to set up, because by default you are already a sole prop. Okay, however, because you have decided that you want to start dealing with money coming in, meaning that your major focus is working towards getting 1 to 3 paid clients or students, right? Because of that reason, it is strongly recommended to be able to open up a business bank account using your social security number. And so when it comes to the actual step-by-step instructions on how to actually open up a sole prop with a business bank account, there's nothing that you need to do right now. Later on inside of this training, we're going to walk you through the step-by-step process of how to actually open up a bank account. Okay, we're going to go through all of the options for that later, but I do want to go ahead and touch on a few points in regards to this option. Okay, question number 1, do I need a DBA? So if you will be conducting business under a different name than your official first and last name, for example, like John Doe wants to open a bank account as John Doe Wellness or John Wellness, right? Let's say, for example, you want to be able to do that, then you're going to need a DBA. Now, a DBA is super cheap and it's super easy to get, because it's literally just something that you file with your local county in your state, or sometimes some states do it at the state level, but either way, it's very easy. It literally costs less than $50 and sometimes even less than $25. I know when I lived in Florida, it was a process that you just did online. It was literally something like $20. You do it and you're done. Here in Texas, where I live now, it's done the county level. Okay, so you can just do a quick search, county name, state, and then DBA. So let's say, for example, Collin County, Texas DBA, or let's say, for example, Florida DBA, right? And you're going to look for a website to the county website, or sometimes some states have a website that's for the entire state. And you're going to be looking for things like doing business as, names such as fictitious name, assumed name registration, things like that. And then on top of that, if you're not sure at all, you can literally just do a quick YouTube search, and there's literally videos for like every single state that'll walk you through that as well. Super easy. And then you just go ahead and print out a certificate, and then you can go ahead and take that certificate to the bank, and you can go ahead and open up your business bank account underneath that DBA. Okay, so remember, we're going to talk about the instructions for opening up a business bank account later on inside of the main training. Okay, so that's how a DBA works. Again, don't stress about this. It's super easy and straightforward. Next up, in regards to the sole prop, do you need an EIN for a sole prop? So an EIN is an employer identification number, and it's usually assigned to a corporation by the IRS. Okay, so it is a requirement for all corporations to be able to get an EIN number, and it's free from the IRS's websites. Okay, however, it is not required to have an EIN number as a sole prop, because you are the business. And so as a result, your social security number is what you can use everywhere as a sole proprietor. Okay, however, it is still possible for you to get an EIN number for a sole prop, which is also for free, if you didn't want to use your SSN, okay? So it is optional, it is a possibility. The only annoying part about getting an EIN as a sole prop is that if you open an EIN with the IRS, it's good practice to close your EIN with the IRS also whenever you decide to move to an LLC, okay? So unless you're planning on staying as a sole prop for a long period of time, it's better for you to just go ahead and create an LLC when you're ready, okay? And when you want to go ahead and have an EIN number, rather than having to deal with, getting an EIN number for your sole prop and then having to close it on later on, all that kind of stuff, okay? And so for general information purposes, again, make sure you go ahead and consult with your tax advisors that we're going to go ahead and recommend for you in just a second. But for general purposes, an SSN, your social security number, will work more than great for this option. So that way you will not need an EIN number for your sole prop. Okay, so that is option number 2 in regards to the business bank account. Remember, we are going to be talking about that in just a second in the main training. Okay, with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about option number 3, which is starting the actual LLC and then filing for the S Corp tax selection once you are at $5,000 to $10,000 per month. So this option number 3, is going to be the way that you're going to go if you are going to be proceeding with setting up your legal entity, okay, which is going to be a standard LLC without any tax election. Okay, now a question that might come up is, do I need to apply for that S tax election as soon as I go ahead and open up my LLC? Now, the answer to that question is, unless you are already doing $50,000 to $100,000 in annual revenue, right? $5,000 to $10,000 a month consistently, you won't need to file for that S tax election for your LLC just yet. What's going to happen is that you are going to, when you first open up your LLC, you are going to be just a standard LLC without any tax election, okay? And then once you hit that $100,000, about that point in annual revenue where the tax savings are going to make sense, then you're going to go ahead and file that S tax election that somebody's going to be able to help you with, that we're going to talk about and advise you on who can file that for you. But you can go ahead and convert that standard LLC retroactively and then save on those taxes, okay? So for now, what's going to happen is you're just going to go ahead and set up a normal LLC and then work on the S tax election once you get to about $100,000 a year in revenue, okay? Now, another question, partnership LLCs, right? If you are going to be getting into a partnership with someone, it is recommended to have two LLCs. One is the partnership LLC, and then you have your own LLC that owns 50% of the partnership LLC. If that just went over your mind and none of that makes any sense, do not worry about it. It's a little bit more complicated, and I don't want to go ahead and talk about it because it's such a small use case, but I did just want to go ahead and mention it in case it was relevant to any student, okay? Next up, naming your LLC. And so if you set up your LLC properly, the way that we recommend below, we're going to talk about that in just a second, okay? You will never need to set up another LLC pretty much for your personal income ever again, okay? And so just using that same LLC, once your income gets to a certain point, you can just add that S Corp tax selection and that's it. You can literally run all of your income through that LLC, right? And so this is why naming it's not that big of a deal either. Why? Because there's a reason why DBAs exist, remember? In fact, our LLC, right, for Remote Wellness Academy is named something general, and then we just have a DBA for Remote Wellness Academy. So our LLC isn't even Remote Wellness Academy. And so that way, if we ever decided not to be Remote Wellness Academy anymore, right, but nothing else in our entire business was changing, we don't have to shut down the LLC, shut down the business bank accounts and all that kind of stuff. It's much easier to be able to go ahead and get a new DBA because we're just rebranding, right? And so that's why having a general name and then switching out the DBAs according to what brand name that you have right now is much more recommended and easier if that is applicable to you. Next up, let's go ahead and talk about the cost of opening an LLC. So the cost of opening an LLC depends on two parts. Number one, it's going to depend on the state filing fee. Okay, so every single state is different in terms of how much it costs to open up an LLC and renew that LLC every single year. For example, California LLCs are about $800 a year in order to maintain. And then Texas LLCs are just $400 one time, and there's like a small franchise tax fee or something like that, right? So here's the big recommendation. It's usually recommended to file in the state of your residence unless a tax professional advises you otherwise, okay? And like I said, in just a second, we're going to recommend a tax professional for you. So that is the first part of the cost of an LLC, and that is unavoidable, okay? The state filing fee is literally paid to the state. That's not something that you can get around no matter what, okay? And then part number two is the service fee. And so this is the fee that the lawyer or the firm is going to charge in order to get everything set up. And that literally can sometimes run hundreds or even sometimes thousands of dollars, okay? Now, here's the thing. Could you go on, let's say, for example, LegalZoom.com and click, stumble your way through and maybe save on the service fee? Maybe, right? But here's the thing. You're still going to have to pay the state filing fee regardless. There is no way to be able to get around that or to be able to save on that. It's not like you can just go out there, go on the internet and get an LLC for free. It doesn't work that way. There are still state filing fees that have to be paid, right? And so this is why we recommend that you have a professional from the very beginning prepare your documents for you and take care of the filing for you as well. Why? Because if you mess setting up your LLC and you mess it up and you don't do it properly, right, you could end up in a situation where you will not be eligible to be able to convert your standard LLC into that LLC with S tax election. And that way you're going to have to pay thousands of dollars in additional taxes because you messed that up because you were trying to do it yourself and you didn't know what the heck you were doing, right? And so you might as well do it properly and you might as well get it set up properly from the very beginning. And so if you set up your LLC properly, it's a one-time project, okay? And then you can go ahead and use that same LLC for life for all of your businesses ever. and never have to change it ever again, right? If you're doing the same type of business XYZ, right? And so regardless of if you decide to stay with your remote wellness practice name or you change your remote wellness practice name, right? We just talked about DBAs just a second ago. You can always just use the same LLC and not have to change out your payment processor, which you talk about later in the main training, not have to change out your bank account, not have to change out all of those kinds of things, okay? And so if you set up your LLC properly, it's a one-time project that is going to serve you for life. And so it's better to just go ahead and get a professional to set it up properly for you once and for all. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, well, you've mentioned tax advisor and you've mentioned, corporate advisor all this time, Coach Yasin. Well, what the heck do we do? Like, I don't know anybody like that, right? And so here's the thing. Of course, in typical RWA over delivery style, we're not just going to leave you hanging for you to go out there and find some random people on the internet. Nope. We're going to go ahead and make sure that we get you the sweetest deal ever just for Remote Wellness Academy students. Okay. And so what we've gone ahead and done for you instead is that we have partnered with a company called Prime Corporate Services to over deliver to RWA students and set up your LLC for you, complimentary, done for you. I know. Right? Really cool. And I'm going to walk you through in just a second exactly what that deal looks like so that way you can understand how awesome this is going to be. But before we do that, let me go ahead and really quickly talk to you about who Prime Corporate Services are, okay? PCS. They've been in business for over 10 years. They've helped over 100,000 entrepreneurs structure their legal entities, okay? They have a team of over 50 corporate advisors who specialize on corporate structuring and entity formation, okay? Prime Corporate Services, they are experts at setting up entities and everything related to legal, finance, and accounting. They are some of the best in the industry. These are the two gentlemen who run the organization over there, Steve and Tommy. They are super, super professionals. They have been in this industry for a very long time, and they know exactly what it is that they are talking about. And so when we needed a partner, when we needed somebody to go ahead and hook RWA students up in typical RWA over delivery fashion, we went ahead and looked at the market to see who could actually match that level of service that we are always aiming to be able to provide to our students. And PCS was the partner that we found, and we are super pumped to be able to go ahead and present to you what it is that we have been able to figure out as a special deal for you as a Remote Wellness Academy student. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about what the deal for PCS is going to look like for RWA students. And just like we did the TCK, the client kit review, we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of a value stack here. Don't worry, it's going to be a lot quicker and to the point. But the reason why we're doing that, and the reason why we're going to do a value stack that was similar to the client kit, is not because we're trying to be inauthentic or scammy. It's honestly because of the fact that we are proud, once again, in what we have been able to go ahead and offer to RWA students. Because when we started out, there was literally no program out there that would give all of the resources and eat the complexity for their students. They would literally just say, hey, go do your own research, or go talk to a lawyer, or go talk to an accountant. Well, here's the thing. It's not like I can just, pull up my phone and talk to my best friend who happens to be a corporate lawyer, right? Or I can just, go ahead and contact the hundreds of people that I know who are corporate lawyers, right? So when those programs would say, hey, go talk to your corporate advisor, or go talk to your legal advisor, your lawyer or something, it's like, well, what the heck does that even mean, right? That doesn't exist for me. And so that's the reason why we wanted to make sure that this was not something that you were just left out in the unknown and you didn't know what to do next, right? We wanted to make sure that you were not stuck in this way. And so in the same way that we revealed the client kit value stack, we're going to do a quicker version of that to be able to reveal to you what the prime deal is for RWA students, because we are genuinely proud at what is it that we have been able to go ahead and provide for you as a loyal RWA student. So let's go ahead and get into the stack. This is where everything's going to go ahead and get super, super fun. And like I said, I'm going to go ahead and do it a little bit quicker than we did previously. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the very first thing that you are going to get inside of this value stack, and that is going to be a complimentary done for you LLC. Okay, so like we talked about, there are two main costs when setting up an LLC. There's going to be the state filing fee that you are not going to be able to get around, period. It's not going to happen, right? And so that is why that is the first main cost. And then the second main cost is the service fee, okay? And like we said, yes, you could go around, go to LegalZoom.com and try to stumble your way, click, and setting up your LLC so you can avoid the service fee. You would still have to pay the state fee no matter what, right? So there's not like there's free LLCs on the internet out there, okay? But here is the cool thing. Yes, you could go out there and try to do it yourself and figure out how to do it, but RWA has worked out a special package for RWA students in which Prime is going to be waiving their service fee for RWA students and setting up your LLC at their cost. And so that means that the only cost to you that you're going to have to take care of is the state filing fee. And that's literally it, okay? So this is literally as sweet as it gets because you're gonna have to pay that anyways. And so basically you're getting a complimentary LLC on the house. They're gonna be taking care of the Secretary of State filing, the IRS filing, as well as the expediting fees that would cost additional to the state in order to get this done quickly. All for you, okay? And so Prime is going to be setting up A to Z, your legal entity at their cost, completely complimentary. And so Prime calls this their complimentary legal entity setup. And so let's go ahead and look at what the stack slide looks like, what you're going to get. Complimentary legal entity setup, value $1,297. What else do you need in order to be successful? What about the additional documents that go along with your LLC? So normally when you have to set up an LLC, right, what you do is you set it up. And then after that, you have to go out and prepare documents and then submit those documents to the IRS website in order to be able to get your EIN, right? We said that every single corporation has to have an EIN. It's kind of like the social security number for corporations, right? You need that in order to open up your bank account. You need that pretty much wherever you're going to go ahead and register your organization. And so here's the thing. The documents that you are going to have to go ahead and prepare after you have your LLC set up are things like your articles of organization, your operating agreement, as well as going to the IRS's website and figuring out how to click, and getting your EIN number. Well, here's the question. What if Prime took care of all of that for you? They call that the complimentary VIP entity setup. And so completely complimentary, they're going to be drafting and creating all of your legal documents for you that go along with your LLC and going to the IRS's website because they already know how to do it and then getting for you your EIN as well. And so all you got to literally do, it's all done for you. Literally just go ahead and say, hey, I want to go ahead and get my LLC set up. Boom. All you do is take care of the state filing fees and they're going to take care of everything else. And you're going to go ahead and get a package with your EIN number, with all the documents that you need, and you are rocking and rolling. You won't have to worry about anything else. How cool is that, right? And so I just want to make sure that you wouldn't be upset if Prime added that for you completely complimentary for you. Just making sure, right? Just making sure over here. So what are you going to get? Complimentary legal entity setup, complimentary VIP document setup, value $597, total value $1,894. But wait, there's more. What else do you need, right? What about someone to actually talk to and walk through everything, right? Not an email or a website, but an actual person. Prime calls this the complimentary tax strategy and asset protection consultation. It's a free 45-minute strategy session. It's going to walk you through asset protection, tax savings, and business credit development. Okay, now don't worry. We've talked to them about this already. It's not a strategy session the way that we think about it. It's much more of a consult in which they're going to go over a review of the different types of business entities that exist, which entity is going to be best for you, tax strategies that are going to be able to help you save money, as well as an introduction to business credit if you ever needed it, as well as an access to a list of 250 plus tax deductions that you can go ahead and take, as well as answering any questions that you might have along the way. Okay, so they're going to go ahead and include that for you complimentary as well. And so I just want to make sure, is it okay if we over deliver, right? And so what you're going to go ahead and get, complimentary tax strategy and asset protection consultation, value $597, total value $2,491. But wait a second. There's more. What else do you need? What about support? Now, this is one of the coolest things, honestly, when we were talking to Prime about setting something up for RWA students. This was one of the coolest things that they talked to us about, was that whenever you work with Prime to get an LLC entity set up, they assign you a corporate advisor. And the cool thing about that is that you get one-on-one, lifelong access and support from your corporate advisor to answer any questions that you might have, right? So any and all questions related to legal, finance, accounting, all of that kind of stuff. Yep. You just hit up your advisor and they will be able to help you with that. How awesome is that, right? And so I just want to make sure, would you be all right if Prime hooked you up with a lifelong one-on-one advisor as a complimentary bonus for you? So what you're going to go ahead and get is lifelong corporate advisor one-on-one support, value $997, total value $3,488. And guess what? What's the cost of all of this for RWA students? All complimentary. All you got to do is take care of the normal filing fees at their cost, which is $300 to $600 depending on what state you live in, okay, which you're going to have to pay anyways, right? How cool is that? Everything else is included for you complimentary from Prime. Okay. Now here's the question, right? You might be super suspicious about this. Like, what the heck? What are they getting out of this? Why are they doing this for RWA students? How has RWA been able to pull this off in working with them? Okay. So number one, we went ahead and put this partnership together because of the fact that we told them we have not only the best RWA students, but we talked to them about the RWA over delivery promise, and they were aligned with that value. And so we said, you know what? Let's go ahead and deliver the best value that we can get for RWA students. And quite frankly and quite transparently, what they are hoping for by putting this deal together for RWA students is that once you actually work with them to set up your LLC at their cost, that you are going to be so wowed by them and their service that you are going to go ahead and use their other legal, credit, and accounting services, right? Because they know that this is going to be the start of a relationship. And so they are willing to be able to invest in that relationship specifically with RWA students, right? They want to be able to provide value so that way you will work with them long term. Make sense? And so that is why we were able to go ahead and get this agreement and this partnership with Prime going for RWA students. Okay. And so what's the next step? How do you actually go ahead and take advantage of the bonuses and getting your LLC opened with the way that we talked about? So we have a special RWA bonuses link that is going to be in the action steps as well as the guide. And what that's going to do is going to take you over to a special page that is going to have a button for you to go ahead and schedule your Prime business strategy meeting. Okay. Now, a couple things on here. Only schedule your call with Prime if you want to make sure that you are proceeding with opening your LLC, which is option number 3 in the USA, okay? If you're going to be going with option 1 or option 2, right? You're going the sole prop route because you're not really focused on making money right now. It's not something you're not worried about liability, all of those other things. You want to follow the other steps. Only schedule a call with them if you are ready to go ahead and start your LLC or you have questions and are not sure what direction you want to go, okay? And then if you're going to be doing that, you want to use that link. And then once you actually schedule that call, you want to make sure that you are professional and that you actually show up, okay? We have told Prime PCS that we have the best students in the industry. Please, please, please do not ruin our relationship and our partnership with them and ruin this opportunity for the rest of the RWA family by being disrespectful or by being a student who wears a failure uniform, doesn't show up, is not professional. Please do not do that, okay? Because you are going to be a reflection to Prime on behalf of the entire RWA community, and it's very important that you respect that, okay? Also, making it extremely clear right now is that every sign-up link is tracked and audited, and so this is a special offer for RWA students only, and so we ask that you be ethical and don't be one of those students who ruins a good thing for everyone else, okay? And so if you know someone who wants to take advantage of this amazing opportunity for their business, just go ahead and email support@remotewellnessacademy.com and we would be happy to help. But you want to understand that this is a bonus specifically for RWA students and you want to respect that, please. And so that is the step-by-step process on how to actually schedule your call with Prime and be able to get your LLC open, complimentary, done for you in the United States, okay? The next thing I want to go ahead and talk to you about is option number 3 for Canadian students, right? The question is, what about Canadian students, right? Does this offer from Prime apply for Canadian students? So here's the thing. Prime Corporate Services currently is only a US-based company. And so if you live in Canada and are looking for setting up and opening a Canadian corporation, please do not schedule a call with Prime because they are unable to currently open up Canadian corporations, okay? And so at this time, we have not yet found a good partner in Canada who would be as reliable and provide our Canadian students with a great service like that, okay? And so we haven't yet found a partnership there. And so we are currently in the process of finding a partner in Canada. And so if any Canadian RWA student has any references or wants to negotiate on behalf of RWA to get a partnership and help all Canadian students save money the way that we've been able to put these partnerships together, we would be happy to work with you or any of your recommendations. So let us know. Shoot us an email at support@remotewellnessacademy.com. However, there is some great news regarding this. The great news is that every single part of this training has pretty much been identical so far for Canadian students as well, right? So from what we know, the sole prop in Canada works very similar to that of the United States. And even though the LLC is not identical, right? There is no pass-through LLC entity in Canada like the LLC. However, the CCPC corporation is still a corporation that would provide the liability benefits and the tax benefits after a certain revenue amount, just like a US corporation would, right? And so the great news about that is that the Canadian system is actually so much more simpler than the US US system, right? And so for Canadian students, the entire process is actually so much more easier to navigate and much, much more simpler to implement as well, right? So if you literally YouTube how to incorporate in Canada, you're going to find that there are so many resources out there in order to be able to guide you with that. And then of course, like I said, if you do have any recommendations around partnerships that we can build in Canada as well, please make sure that you let us know, because we are more than happy to save RWA students as much money as we can through these partnerships, okay? And so with that being said, those are the 3 options and the step-by-step instructions on how to actually set up your legal entity. So make sure that you go ahead and do that, because you will not be able to get to opening up a business bank account, and you will not be able to process payments, and you will not be able to go ahead and get the rest of everything set up. If you need a legal entity and you need a business bank account and all that kind of stuff, you're going to want to go ahead and make sure that you get this process done. And so with that being said, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and cut back over to the main training and continue over there, because this has been the step-by-step process of opening your legal entity. And so we're going to go ahead and cut back over to the main training right now. All right, welcome back from that mini training about the step-by-step instructions for opening your legal entity. You can see we were not joking when we said that we were going to simplify this for you, step-by-step, given to you right there. Now what we're going to go ahead and do, now that you have a good understanding of that, and now you've gone ahead and in the action steps down below, you're going to be setting all of this up step-by-step. We're now going to go ahead and next talk about your business bank account, okay? Because after you have set up your legal entity, the next step is that you're going to go ahead and proceed with creating your business bank account. Now, remember, this only applies if you are going to be going down the route of a sole prop with a business bank account or with an LLC. Those are the only options in which this applies. If you're just dabbling and you're just learning and you're not even going to transact any money, then obviously you don't need a business bank account. But for those of you who a business bank account is going to be relevant, why is it important for you to have a business bank account? The reason why is because once you actually start accepting money from your business activities, having a separate bank account is massive. It's going to help keep track of all of the money that is coming in and all of the money that is going out, right? You're going to have all sorts of expenses when running your business, okay? And it's going to be much easier to keep track of those when they are separate from your personal expenses, right? And so as you're doing business, you might want to buy a microphone, you might want to sign up for a software, you might want to do all these kinds of things, right? And so if you don't actually create a separate business bank account, then at the end of the year, when you have to do all of your accounting, it is going to be a complete mess. You're going to have to spend like 3 weeks plus in isolation just to figure out what in the world happened with your expenses. You're going to have to look at your bank statement. You're going to have to wonder, hey, was this a personal expense or was this a business expense? You're not even going to remember, and it's going to be so difficult. Versus when you have a separate business bank account, it's very easy. All of the transactions that happen in the business bank account are business. All of the transactions that happen in your personal account are personal. Very, very easy. And if you don't do this, it's going to be an absolute and complete nightmare. How do we know that this is the sort of pain that you're going to have to go through? Because we ourselves and so many other people in their first year of doing business have made this mistake. We wish that we had been more sensible and set things up clean from the very beginning, because even after just 6 months or 1 year, it would have saved us so much time and effort if we had just properly done it from the start. So now that you understand why a business bank account and a separate business bank account is so important, the next question is, well, hey, what bank account should I actually open? What business bank account should I open, right? Now, there's a couple options here. The first one is going to be the major banks, right? We're talking about business checking in the major banks. Now, pretty much every major bank allows you to open up a business checking account, right? Whether that be Chase Bank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Capital One, US Bank, so many other banks that are out there, and even most Canadian banks, if not all major Canadian banks, right? However, the issue is that not all banks are created equal. Some of them are more annoying than others. Some of them have technology and apps like they're still living in the 1990s, okay? And they also don't allow you to do the things that are like basic that you just want to do, right? And so from our experience, we have had business bank accounts in all of these different banks. We've had business checking accounts in Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Capital One, US Bank. All of them, for us at the time that we tried them, they might have updated, okay? We're just sharing our experience, was that they were not that great for us, okay? But then in the last few years, we have transferred all of our business checking accounts and even a lot of our personal accounts to banking with Chase. And so far, from our experience, it has been a great experience, okay? Now, again, this is completely up to you. All we are doing is we are sharing our experience. Now, here's the thing. Just because Chase has has great business checking and the apps and the technology and all that kind of stuff does not mean that it is the decision to go through. Why? Because here's the thing. The advantage of the major bank accounts is that yes, they have in-person branches that you can go to, but the disadvantage to the major bank accounts is that normally what they have is that they have monthly maintenance fees or minimum balances that they charge every single month. Okay. Now this is what I'm talking about for the vast majority of the major banks. And so every major bank is going to have a different minimum in order to avoid those fees. And so for Chase Bank specifically, right now, this is what it looks like on their just basic business checking, is that there's a $15 monthly service fee unless you are actively having at least $2,000 minimum daily balance inside of that bank account. What that means is that over the course of the entire month, there has to have been $2,000 in that bank account in order for you to be able to waive that monthly service fee. And so that monthly service fee is going to be $15. Now, if you're okay with that, by all means, you can go ahead and pay $15 every single month. But if you want to waive that, then you're like, okay, wait a second. I got to be able to figure out how to be able to get $2,000 in that bank account. Now, you can obviously just go ahead and transfer $2,000 from your personal checking account and just leave it inside of your business checking, right? And you can do that from any bank. It doesn't matter if your personal checking is with a different bank at all, right? And you can just leave it in there so that way you can avoid that monthly fee, but that is completely up to you, right? Maybe your business is not at the point where you're generating $2,000 to put in that bank account yet, right? So this is what we're talking about is you just want to be aware that that does exist so that way you're not getting charged fees if you don't want them, right? And then this also applies to Canada, right? Their equivalent of the US major banks have the exact same setup in Canada as well. And so this note of looking at the minimum balances and the monthly fees and all that kind of stuff is very important before you actually decide what bank you want to go ahead and open up your business bank account with, okay? The other option, as opposed to the major banks, is the alternative banks, okay, for business checking. And so in the last few years, alternative online banks have really emerged to offer more benefits than the major banks and provide that ease of service, right? And so the biggest advantage of these online alternative banks is that they are online based. And so they don't have any fees or minimums or any of that kind of stuff, right? But the disadvantage to these online banks is that they don't have any in-person physical locations other than the ATMs, which they waive the fees on and stuff like that, right? So everything is done online or through the app. And so again, pros and cons, right? There's no minimums, there's no fees, right? You can have $0 in that account and they're not going to charge you any fees. And so just one example of that is like Novo. This is a big one that has gotten pretty big. You can see here, they go ahead and kind of talk about how they are different than the traditional business bank accounts. They talk about, hey, there's no monthly fees, there's no usage fees, right? They're talking about why they are different than the typical major banks. And then on top of that, you're going to see that if you just do a quick Google search, you're going to see that there are so many other different options for online banks in both the US and in Canada. Okay, there are many, many, many different options. Novo is just one example of that. Personally, we have not tried any of the online banks, but I just did want to expose you to that so you recognize that that is an option if you don't want to have to deal with minimums and all that kind of stuff based off of where your business is at currently. Okay, so from this point, what we're going to go ahead and do right now is we're going to go ahead and walk you through the step-by-step instructions of actually opening up a business bank account so that way you can properly be set up for the next part of this training that is going to need your business bank account in order to proceed. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go over to a mini training that is going to walk you through how to actually open up your business bank account step by step. So let's go ahead and cut over to that now. All right, welcome to this quick mini training about the step-by-step instructions of opening a business bank account. We're going to go ahead and walk you through this step-by-step so that way you can be successful with this. Let's go ahead and talk about this right now. So the step-by-step instructions of opening a business bank account. Step number 1 is you are going to have to go ahead and make a business bank decision. Okay, so regardless of which direction you decide to go through, whether that be the major bank or an alternative online bank, you will be required to make a decision of which one you want to work with, okay? Now, this applies to both US or Canadian students. You want to make sure that you have decided which account you want to be able to go ahead and work with. You want to go ahead and make a decision on what bank you want to work with. Now, just as a reminder, you only want to continue with this if you're going to be a sole prop with a business bank account or if you are going to be doing the LLC route, right? If you're just learning and exploring and there's no money being changed, then obviously you don't need a business bank account. Step number 2 is you want to go ahead and prepare your documents, okay? If this this is going to be something that you are going in person for the major banks to open the business bank account. You want to make sure that you review the bank's page on their website for what documents they need, okay? If you're going to be opening your business under a DBA, make sure that you get that confirmation of that DBA registration with you. If you are a sole prop, okay, and you're opening up your business bank account, then you are going to go ahead and be able to use your SSN in order to do that, okay? And then on top of that, if you're going to be registering an LLC, right, if you're going to go ahead and open a bank account for an LLC, then whenever you go ahead and get that set up with Prime Corporate Services, and they're going to be able to have that complimentary LLC for you, right, then what's going to happen is that they're going to provide you all of the documentation that you need to bring to the bank, right? They're going to give you a packet, and then you're going to take that packet. It's going to have your operating agreement, your EIN, and all of that kind of stuff. And then you're going to see on like a website, like in Chase's website, they actually have an entire link around, hey, what you need to bring in order to open a business bank account. So you can find that on the website and follow that and make sure that you have all of the proper documentation, okay? Step number 3 is you're then going to go ahead and follow the instructions from the online bank or the banker, right? If that's in person or the online bank, in order to actually go ahead and open up your business checking account, okay? So make sure that it is a checking account, not a savings account, because you're going to have transactions coming in and out, okay? And you also want to make sure that you look at the minimums and the fees associated with that, so that way you are prepared if you have to transfer money over or you're ready to pay the fees or whatever that might look like, okay? You want to make sure that you are ready for that, okay? And then step number 4 is that you are not going to be able to continue with the payment setup and some of the other stuff if you are going to be transacting money without completing this bank account step. So you need to make sure that you have your bank account set up if you are going to be processing credit card payments, which we're going to walk you through in the actual main training. Again, remember, if you're doing option 1, you don't need to accept payments and you don't need a bank account. But if you're doing any of the other options, that is going to be where you need to make sure that you are getting all of this set up properly, so that way you are rocking and rolling the right way. Okay, so that is the step-by-step instructions in regards to actually opening up your business bank account. Make sure that you actually do get that done. Don't waste time. Don't go around and make this all scary and all that kind of stuff. Okay, I know it might be the first time for new students who are doing this. It might seem a little bit scary, but don't worry. Whenever you're doing anything for the first time, that's how it always seems. Just take it step by step by step, and I promise you over time, this is going to become super, super easy for you to be successful with. Okay, so with that being said, we're going to go ahead and hop back over to the main training right now. All right, welcome back from that mini training about opening your business bank account. That is going to be absolutely critical if that is going to be relevant to the options that you are going to be proceeding with. With that being said, let's go ahead and keep on chugging along inside of this training. Let's go ahead and address some questions around bookkeeping and other tax savings, because some students might have a question. Well, hey, what about cash coding my transactions every single month? What about payroll expenses? What about other tax savings? What about how to read a profit and loss P&L statement? What about how to read a balance sheet? How do I actually use my finances and accounting to make business decisions, right? Or any other questions related to legal, finance, and accounting. So here's the thing. Because most RWA students at this point inside of the program are really just starting out, they don't even have any transactions inside of their business or really any consistent monthly revenue. It doesn't really make sense for us to be able to go into extensive detail about all of these topics, right? Because the game of taxes, the game of legal, finance, and accounting is very big. Obviously, this entire training is like a seminar by itself, and we're only scratching the surface of that specific game, right? That's why in the income and business training, we talk about these as different games that you are playing in regards to income and business, right? And so instead, what we're going to do is we're going to save all of those questions and many more to be able to touch on in the module where we go ahead and absolutely make you a killer ninja when it comes to legal, finance, and accounting techniques inside of that module specifically. Okay, so for right now, just focusing on being somewhat familiar with what it is that we are going over inside of this training is going to allow you to be more than a lot of light years ahead of everyone else that is starting out. And then in the future, we will be able to go ahead and touch on more of those advanced topics. Okay, beautiful. Now, having said that, This, ladies and gentlemen, congratulations. This is the completion of the first major part. And this is why I was not joking when I said that this is going to be the biggest chunk of this entire training is going to be the corporations and legal entities and the bank account and all that kind of stuff, because it is the most technical. It is what requires the most background information and knowledge. And now we can actually go ahead and talk about accepting payments as well as your legal agreement. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and really talk about that next. Now, as we go ahead and really start to bring all of this together, I do want to go ahead and really wrap up this section with a very important reminder to you, is that it is very easy to get lost in the world of corporations, legal entities, and taxes. And you just want to go ahead and remember that 30% savings of $0 is still $0. And so even though we went ahead and talked about the legal entity and all that kind of stuff, right? It really does haunt and terrorize a lot of amateur newbies and beginners. But you always want to remind yourself that every single second that you stress about really going ahead and focusing on these things that don't matter is one extra minute away from the things that do matter. Okay, so don't major in the minors. You want to make sure that you keep the main thing, and you don't want to cross the line from being just an amateur newbie beginner, which is perfectly fine. Being a beginner is awesome, but you don't want to cross that line into becoming a student who wears the failure uniform. So yes, you want to spend time getting your corporations and legal foundations correct. Absolutely. But spending more than a week on it, spending more than 2 weeks on it, right? When you have zero money coming in, you have zero active students or clients, you do not want to go ahead and get stuck with that. And then all of a sudden you don't have any momentum. Okay. Now, on top of that, what about the topic about being overwhelmed, right? Well, here's the thing. When was the last time you ever really sat down and had fun studying legal entities and taxation? Probably not, right? And so that's the point. Everything that we've touched on inside of this training so far, it's just like when you were going ahead and learning how to ride a bike or drive a car, right? There was a lot of things that felt overwhelming, and that's a good thing, because the thing is that the more you get exposed to it, the more you're going to be able to go ahead and become better and better and better at it, right? Well, the first time you learned how to drive a car, it was like there was a gazillion things going on at once, right? You had to fix the backup mirrors, you had to stay in your lane, you had to, turn on your signal, you had to, remember which one was the accelerator and the brake, right? And so at the same time, the more you got exposed to it, the better you got at it as well. So maybe this isn't a legal and tax thing is so confusing for me problem. And it might just be, hey, I haven't been exposed to legal entities and taxation before, and that's why it's confusing. And so before this training, you were having unconscious incompetence, right? You didn't even know how much was out there in regards to the game of legal finance and accounting. And because of this training, all of that has now been exposed to you. And that's why you are feeling the overwhelm, because you have now become conscious of your incompetence. And the only solution to that is the knowledge and the repetition that will allow you to be able to ascend to the point where you are unconsciously competent at these things because of your exposure to them. And so just remember that skill equals knowledge times reps. I've said this a gazillion and 2 times throughout this entire training program. And so even just with this knowledge that you are somewhat exposed to, your RAS is now primed, and now automatically you're going to start noticing more about legal and accounting structures, and more of it is going to go ahead and make sense to you, okay? But the biggest thing is that you do not want to get stuck judging yourself over things that are completely normal. It's completely normal to feel emotions around fear and overwhelm and confusion. That's absolutely normal. But judging yourself, that is not helpful whatsoever. And so we want to do less of the things that are not helpful, and we want to do more of the things that are helpful. Yes? Yes. And so if any of this overwhelms you, okay, I would urge you to go ahead and revisit your Becoming Journal and update your identity to someone who can actually stick with that feeling of overwhelm in order to be able to push through that valley of despair and get to the point where you are unconsciously competent, right? You need to become a different version of yourself that is able to go ahead and work on themselves. And I promise you, when you become the person who is able to go ahead and stick with it, you will absolutely get better at these things from there. Very, very, very important points that we're talking about here, especially for those students. Not every student is like you, okay? Sometimes I know some students go through this and they're like, man, this was basic, Yasin. I really didn't have any issues with this or whatever, right? Or, hey, Coach Yasin, I'm coaching myself through this. I really didn't have that much issue with this. But here's the thing. Not every student is like you. These introductions and these warnings and these pre-frames, all of this is for those students who do struggle with these things. And we want to talk to those students as as well, okay? And then the other note on this, as we start to really bring everything together and then we talk about accepting payments, is, hey, what if my situation was different than what was discussed in the training? Well, my question to you is, for general information purposes, how do you think that we learned everything that it is that we talked about inside of this training, right? We weren't born knowing this, right? We learned it off of Google and YouTube, and we checked it with our CFO. And so if your situation is not 100% the same as was outlined in this training, then we do recommend speaking to Prime Corporate Services. Yes, right? The one that we went ahead and talked to, so that way they can be your tax legal advisors, right? But we also recommend you educating yourself, because it's equally as important. You please do not be a remote control student who expects to be spoon-fed and follows blindly, okay? You need to tap into and develop your muscle of resourcefulness while doing this, because if you literally just do a simple Google and YouTube search, you're going to find, hey, Sole Prop Explained, LLC Explained, right? How to open a business bank account with the Sole Prop, right? All of these, there's so many amazing YouTube videos and articles that exist out there. And so honestly, whenever we go deep on a topic, this might be helpful for something in terms of breaking your belief. Whenever we go deep on a topic, sometimes we'll just spend 3 to 4 hours just Googling and YouTubing and taking notes, okay? And so I guarantee you that if you replace your social media, your dead time, your wasted time on entertainment, Netflix, YouTube, all that kind of stuff, and you replace it with podcasts, audiobooks, and educational YouTube videos related to business, entrepreneurship, taxes, I guarantee you that within 1 week, you would learn more on this topic than you ever have before, and on so many more topics that you didn't even think were imaginable, okay? And so just like we learned it, for general information purposes, it means that you can learn it from Google and YouTube also. Any question that you have about these topics can easily be answered on Google and YouTube, right? And then you can go ahead and talk to your tax and legal advisor about that. So that way you're educated. And so I promise you, you can figure it out as well. Do you think that if there are thousands of videos and articles on Google and YouTube with millions of views, it probably means that others have figured it out as well? So you just got to ask yourself, hey, if others can figure this out, why can't I, right? And so you just got to get baseline education and then talk to your advisor as well, okay? And so please make sure that you are resourceful and that you are exploring answers, and then you are talking to Prime Corporate Services before just dumping on us and expecting us to have all of the answers. Obviously, we're here to help, right? Just don't go out there and get stuck for 2-3 weeks and say, hey, I haven't been able to make progress because I've been stuck and you told me to be resourceful and I haven't been able to find the answer. Obviously, do some searching and then make sure you talk to Prime Corporate Services so that way they're your advisors. And then after that, of course, you can come in and ask us, right? However, you just want to make sure that you've actually gone ahead and tried to help yourself first. Very, very, very important, okay? Now, with that being said, what we're going to go ahead and do is we are going to go ahead and talk about accepting payments and building out your online payment accepting system. But before we do that, let's go ahead and do a pulse check. Here's our old friend back with his office chair. Looks like he's in Banff, Canada for this training. I just want to check in. How are you doing so far? Remember, take it step by step. We have purposely consolidated all of this education into one big training on purpose, okay? Just remember that is the beauty of e-learning, that you are able to go ahead and break it up. So make sure that you are taking a break. Otherwise, it is going to feel like, man, this is so long. This is just dragging on. Please, please, please make sure that you are taking a break. And so just take a second, look away from the computer, take that break, stand up, move around if you need it, and then you can go ahead and come back and resume the training. All right, welcome back from your break. Again, remember, these are going to be very important breaks for you to take, so that way all of this does not just go completely over your head, because taking in this much knowledge and education in one sitting is going to be quite difficult. So the breaks are very important. Remember, we have purposely consolidated these topics into one training, only with the fact that you are going to be able to take breaks. If you're not taking breaks, then we'd be better off just splitting up these trainings into like 10 different trainings, because then we'd be able to make them digestible for you. So as long as you take breaks, we're going to be okay with going ahead and combining all of these topics together. Okay, so picking up where we left off, we're going to go ahead and talk next about accepting payments and your entire payment system. As we start to close out this training, we are getting to the tail end of this training. Let's go ahead and talk about accepting payments. Okay, so if you were to ask us what is probably some of the most important systems and operations inside of our company, without a doubt, the top of that list would be being able to accept credit card payments. Because if we had no way to accept money into our business, our company would run out of oxygen, okay? And we're not just talking about any sort of money. We're specifically talking about being able to accept credit card payments, okay? It's pretty much mandatory in the modern workplace if you want to function to be able to accept credit card payments, okay? And literally, if you're asking for like checks and bank wires and cash in today's world as a form of payment from your customers or from your clients or from your students, we're not even sure like how would that even work, right? People want to be able to pay for things quickly and easily, either over the phone or via an invoice or via a payments page. They don't want to have to figure out how to be able to send you a check and then get a stamp and then figure out a bank wire. And so to this day, I am still absolutely shocked whenever I hear that somebody is running their online business and they're unable to accept credit card payments. It's just madness, okay? So here's the truth. In the modern world of online income, you need to be able to receive payments instantaneously without you having to move a single finger or shuffle around any papers, okay? If you do not have that capability, then I'm sorry to say that you are doing it wrong and you're gonna have a very hard time making money in the online economy. And so that's exactly why we're going to be talking to you about the step-by-step of how to set this up, because there are two big benefits of being able to get set up with accepting credit card payments. The first one is being able to ask for payment immediately on the strategy session in order to be able to save time and seal the deal. Because as soon as the prospect or the student says, hey, you know what, I'm ready to go ahead and sign up, then you want to go ahead and be able to seal the deal with them rather than you having to wait to figure out, oh man, I can't get a hold of this person anymore. They're supposed to be sending me a check in the mail. I can't get a hold of him anymore. He's ghosted me, whatever it might be, right? Versus it's as simple as like, hey, is this something you want to do? Prospect says, yes, let's do it. Cool. I'm going to send you a payment link invoice right now. What card did you want to use? Boom. Simple as that, right? The second big reason of why being able to accept credit cards is such a big thing is because it allows your prospects to be able to use credit. And so even though some people might have a difference of opinion about being able to spend money that they don't have, the truth is that being able to do that in certain circumstances, when it's an investment for yourself, when you're actually doing it in a smart way, when you're doing it as, all those kinds of things, it might be smart. And the truth is that in today's economy, a lot of people use credit for things, right? And so that might be an option that your prospects and your students want to be able to use. And so if you're not able to go ahead and accept credit card payments, then you won't be able to offer that option for your prospects to be able to pay with money that they don't have for your program, right? It might be their own decision that they want to do that. You don't judge them for that, but that's why it's very important for you to be able to have that, and as well as many other benefits to be able to accept credit card payments as well, okay? But here's the thing. With accepting credit card payments, there comes along another aspect to this, which is credit card processing fees, okay? So when you're going to be dealing with the payment processor, which we'll talk to you about here in just a second, okay? There's not going to be an upfront, like a subscription cost. It's not like you're paying the payment processor like, $50 a month or something like that. But instead, what they do is they charge a percentage, like 2 to 3% of each transaction. Now, I can already hear students who wear the failure uniform thinking, I don't want to accept credit cards because of the fact that there's a fee. No comment. Honestly, there is nothing compared to the value that you get from accepting credit cards that would not justify the 2 to 3% fee, okay? It widens your market. It increases your strategy session closing percentage because you can accept payment right there and then. It saves you a huge amount of time, as well as it saves your prospects a huge amount of time. And so the value that you get from accepting credit cards far exceeds the small percentage cost. It's a no-brainer for anyone that has a brain, okay? This is very important. I don't normally talk so aggressively, but the reason I'm saying that is because it's so absolutely critical for you to understand. I can't tell you how many people that I've seen in forums and Facebook groups and all this kind of stuff online where they're entrepreneurs or amateur newbie beginners or students who wear the failure uniform, and they're whining and complaining about the credit card fee, and they're worrying about 2%, 2.5% and all this kind of stuff, when the truth is that it is a luxury to be able to have that conversation because accepting credit cards has so much value to it, okay? So anybody who complains or whines about it or doesn't do it because of the fee, I got no comment for that, all right? So that is a couple points that I did want to go ahead and mention in regards to accepting credit cards. Now let's go ahead and talk about the actual logistics around accepting credit cards, because there are two pieces that you are going to need. You're going to need a payment processor and you're going to need a payment terminal. Let's go ahead and talk about the payment processor piece right now, and we're going to go ahead and explain that and exactly what Stripe is, okay? So in order to be able to process credit card payments, you need to work with a payment processor. Now, there are many payment processors that are out on the market, but by far the biggest and the easiest to use is a payment processor called Stripe, okay? It is by far the biggest in the world right now, and it is available in pretty much all different countries around the world. And so we do not use apps like PayPal or Cash App or Venmo, because those are really for personal uses or like sending payments to contacts, right? If you're a business and you're trying to send a payment to a contact that you have in your record, right? Try to pay a bill or salary or or, invoice or something like that, then you might go ahead and use maybe PayPal, right? Definitely not Cash App or Venmo, because those are more personal uses, right? We actually had one time a customer on a call tell us, hey, can I Venmo you the money and then you can give it to NutriFit Wellness, which was a remote wellness practice, right? When a student or a prospect asks that question, it's a sign that they're trying to diminish you as an organization. So our response was very simple. Hey, when you go to Walmart, do you ever tell the cashier or the customer service agent, hey, can I Venmo you and then you can just go ahead and pay Walmart for my groceries? Of course not, right? We're a proper business, and so we don't use PayPal and Venmo and Cash App and all these other ones. We use a proper payment processor, just like proper businesses do, okay? Very, very, very important. Now, the other reason why there was a star right here is because if you are in a country that is outside the US or Canada, you want to make sure that you check if Stripe is available for you as a payment processor. If it is not, then you can just Google Stripe alternatives and see what is available in your country, and you're going to find many of them that exist. Okay, so that is the first piece of this entire accepting credit card payments setup, which is the payment processor. And then the second piece of all of this is what is known as the payment terminal. And let's go ahead and talk about this right now. So once you have a payment processor set up, which we're going to walk you through step by step in just a second, you're going to need a payment terminal in order to run those payments through. Okay. So those are two different things. You have your processor, your payment processor, and then you have your terminal. Okay. And so you can kind of imagine when you go to a store, they have that machine that you swipe the card on, right? That's the terminal, right? And so the processor is where the money goes through the terminal, right? And so sometimes payment processors also have terminals, like in the case of Stripe. Even though Stripe is a payment processor, they also do have a basic payment terminal that you can use for emergency situations. However, it's actually not recommended to use Stripe to be the terminal because of the fact that there are additional fees when you actually use Stripe as the terminal, as well as due to safety reasons, Stripe does not like it when you use their setup for being your sole primary terminal. Okay, so in fact, you can actually get your Stripe payment processor account banned if you use their terminal too much because of the fact that they don't like it that much. Okay, so this is why we need a separate payment terminal to be able to connect our Stripe payment processor, so that way we can send things like invoices and collect payments and have our logo on it and all of that kind of stuff, right? Now, luckily, because at this point we do have the client kit set up, this is another software expense that TCK is going to save us because we don't need to go out there and pay $20 to $50 per month for a payment terminal software that's going to allow us to be able to send those invoices and keep track of all of that and XYZ, right? And so because of the client kit and because you already have that set up, this is not going to have to be something that we worry about. Okay, so that is the basic rundown of accepting payments. You have the payment processor and then you have the payment terminal, and both of those are connected and they work together. So what we're going to go ahead and do next is we're going to go ahead and walk you through step by step of actually getting your process set up so that way you can actually go ahead and start accepting payments. So we're going to walk you through step by step on getting your Stripe account set up. We're going to walk you through step by step on how to get your TCK account connected to your Stripe, as well as how to be able to send an invoice, as well as how to be able to test the entire system. So we're going to go ahead and cut over to a mini training that is going to go ahead and walk you through that right now. All right, welcome to this quick mini training that's going to walk you through the step-by-step instructions of being able to set up your payment system. We're going to go ahead and break this down into multiple parts because there are multiple systems that you need to set up. Okay, so part number one is going to be all about creating your Stripe payment processor account. Okay, so how you're going to go ahead and do this is you are going to go over to stripe.com and you are going to go ahead and click on start now, and then it's going to go ahead and walk you through a process in order to actually go ahead and create your Stripe account. When you actually go ahead and click on start now, what's going to happen is it's going to take you over to a screen that looks like this. And all you got to do is just fill in the basic information on there. And then it's going to go ahead and walk you through how to be able to actually create your account. You can also then verify your email address. Okay, now, quick point on here. Email address right here. Does this have to be my business email, right? Here's the thing. Don't sweat the small things. To this day, my main Stripe login is set up under my personal email address. And so it doesn't really even matter. So don't stress about it, okay? So email, full name, country, you're going to see on here like we talked about inside of the main training. They have plenty of countries that are on here. Canada's on here. Denmark is on here. Croatia's on here. Like pretty much every major country in the entire world is on here. And then obviously there are alternatives that exist out there as well, okay? So what's going to happen is that once you go through this process, what's going to happen is that you are going to have to verify your email address. You see, we went ahead and created a demo account on there. And then once you actually go ahead and log in, then you're going to have to go ahead and activate your account. Now, this is going to be very important. You're going to have to fill in information in order to activate your account. It's not like, oh, I made an account and all of a sudden I can process payments. There's an entire process for that. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the screen right now that's going to walk you through what that process looks like. All right, so here we are. So what happens is that once you make your Stripe account, okay, once you actually go ahead and create it, and then once you actually go ahead and activate it, there's going to be an option that says, activate payments, or if you got to log back in, it'll say something like continue activating or something along those lines. And it's going to take you over to a form that looks like this, in which you're going to have to verify your business. You're going to have to add your bank, secure your account, add any extras, and review and finish. So I'm going to walk you through this so that way we can go ahead and do it step by step and really over deliver for you and walk you through this so that way you don't actually get stuck. Okay, so what are the steps for this? Number one on here, you're going to go ahead and verify your business. The reason why they ask these questions is because there is legality around this. Not everybody and their grandma can just go ahead and process payments. So you got to verify your business. Okay, so what's going to happen is you're going to be here where it's going to be business type. So you're going to put your business location. You're going to go ahead and put type of company. Most likely is going to be a company on here. So it's not going to be individual, nonprofit, it's going to be company. And then there is going to be business structure. And this is where you're going to see sole prop, single member LLC, multi-member LLC, private partnership, private corporation, or other, I'm not sure, right? So for most of you, based off the options, it's either going to be a sole prop or it's going to be a single member LLC. A multi-member LLC is where you have more than one owner inside of the LLC, like a partnership or, multi-owner or something like that. For most of you, it's going to be a single member LLC, right? And so that is why it's so important to make sure that you do the previous steps, because if you are going to be registering in an LLC, it's going to be very important to make sure that you have all of that information set up with your EIN number and everything that our partner is going to help you with. So that way you have that offer and they're going to help you make sure that you are rocking and rolling with that, okay? And then in terms of a private corporation, that is going to be typically something that's like an LLC with an S election or something like that, okay? So what you're going to go ahead and do, I'm going to walk you through what this looks like on the sole prop side, and then we'll come back and look at what it looks like on the LLC side, okay? So sole prop, company, United States, continue, and then you're going to see on the next screen here where it's going to go ahead and ask you for your legal business name. Now, inside of the actual guide for this training, I am not going to go through step by step, line by line. I'm going to go ahead and give you an overview, but then all of these step-by-step instructions are in the guide that you can follow along as well. So that way, if I miss anything that I'm going over here, you want to make sure that you reference the guide for that. Okay. So on here, legal business name, that's going to be the legal business name of that, whatever you have registered with the state. If you are a sole prop, this is going to be your first and your last name, because remember, you are the business. Okay. EIN. Now, EIN, you're going to notice that this says that if you use your social security number for tax business purposes, you can enter that instead, because remember, we're talking about a sole prop. And so a sole prop is going to allow you to use your SSN everywhere else, right? And so that's why you're going to be going ahead and entering that on here. Again, remember, if you are having that complimentary LLC done for you, this is all going to be a part of the packet that they give you. So that way you don't have to go to the IRS's website and figure out how to get an EIN and all that kind of stuff, okay? That's for the LLC. And then for the sole prop, you're going to be able to use your SSN. Doing business as, that's if you have a DBA. Registered business address, that's going to be the same address that you had above, right? Registered business address there. And then in terms of industry, we recommend either other educational services or consulting. Typically, we don't like health and wellness coaching because of the fact that sometimes that falls into categories that might not suit us. Because sometimes if you put health and wellness coaching, some people might think, oh, that has to do with medical stuff and all this kind of stuff. So just because we have our definition of health and wellness coaching, the industry might have their own definition. So we want to kind of stay away from that. And then business website, you're going to see here, this is the reason why we actually have the business website set up prior to this, so that way you can have a link to be able to put over here. And then finally, you have product description that goes along right over here. Now, this is going to be very important for you to note, okay? Payment processors do not like trigger words that are high risk, okay? That's what they're filtering out for. The reason why they're asking these questions is to filter you out if you're a high risk business, which we're not. And so we have to make sure that we communicate properly to the payment processors, right? And so we want to make sure things like, hey, medical related or weight loss medical or something, all those are triggering words, right? And so we don't want to go ahead and do that. We're ethical, and we just want to make sure that we are presenting ourselves in the proper way. And so just as an example product description that you could use if you want to, we've gone ahead and included that in the actual guide. One-on-one wellness coaching and education. Provide wellness coaching online to clients who want to live a healthier lifestyle. We process clients immediately at checkout with member agreements in place, right? So that's just an example of what you could use to enter right here if you actually wanted to do so, okay? So that is going to be the business detail side of things. And then if we actually go here to single member LLC, we're going to go ahead and see that it looks very, very similar to that entire process on here as well. So legal business name, that's going to be what is registered with the actual state. Of course, EIN number for an LLC is going to be a requirement. That's going to be in the packet that our partner gives you, business website, and then product description. So everything else pretty much stays the same. Then we go ahead and go over to business representative. This is going to be the legal name of the person, which is going to be yourself, your email address, your date of birth, your home address, your phone number, and then the last 4 of your social security number. That, of course, is pretty standard in terms of just verifying your identity. After that, we're going to go ahead and get into fulfillment details. Do you sell physical goods? The answer to that is going to be no, based off of remote wellness practices, right? Obviously, if you're setting this up for like an e-commerce store, which if you're in the program, I don't know why you are, but of course, that is a different matter. But I'm talking about, this is the tutorial for setting it up for remote wellness practice. On average, how long after customers are paying, typically do they receive the goods and services? That is going to be within 1 day, okay? And then you're going to go ahead and click on continue. Of course, because this is just an example, I am not clicking on continue, okay? In terms of public details, you can then come up with a statement descriptor that comes up on the bank statement of your customers, and then you can come up with a shortened descriptor as well, right? So just an abbreviation of your remote wellness practice name, customer service phone number, customer support address. All of those are just generic, general things that you can always change later as well, okay? From there, next up, what's going to happen is that you are going to go ahead and add and connect your bank to your actual Stripe processing. This is going to be the bank in which your funds are going to be sent to once they are processed via Stripe. And so it's very important to make sure that you have everything set up prior to this with your business bank account. So that way, as you are transacting, you're having all of this money go into your business bank account. You do not want to set this up going to your personal bank account. Do not do that. It's going to be messy and it's going to be terrible, okay? Do not do that. Very, 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 very important, okay? Now, other quick notes on here, okay? As you're typing in here, let's say, for example, you type something and then you're like, you know what? I'm not able to find the bank that I want to have, right? You can go ahead and manually add your bank account, which is a lot slower, but that is an option potentially if you want to do it. Or you can go ahead and contact their support team as well, okay? Obviously, Stripe is a multi-billion-dollar company. You will be able to go ahead and contact their support as well using that option. They have chat support, call support, email support, all of that good jazz, right? So you will be able to go ahead and use that link there to contact their support as well. From there, the next step after you go ahead and add your bank details is to go ahead and secure your account using two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication is basically where you need to use your password as well as a text message code. That's going to be for extra security. Make sure you go ahead and get that set up. In terms of adding extras, right? So the first one on here is automating sales tax calculation. Of course, we don't have sales tax. This is for physical goods normally. So you're going to be able to click on no thanks. And then after that, if you want to go ahead and set up, showing customers that you care about your carbon footprint and, the climate and all that kind of stuff, you can go ahead and decide if you want to go ahead and donate to that, or you can go ahead and click on no thanks, okay? And then from there, you're going to go ahead and go to review and finish. And then from there, you're going to make sure that you go ahead and review and make sure everything is correct. Of course, this is just an example, but that is going to be where you go ahead and review everything, and then you go ahead and submit it. And then step number 6 on here is you're going to go ahead and wait for your account to get approved. And so depending on certain factors, this might take a few hours. It might take even a few days. You want to be patient, monitor your email address, and you want to go ahead and make sure that you are looking for updates. Now, number 7, you got to understand payment processor rules and staying in good standing. This is very important because it is possible to have your payment processor banned. Why? Because Stripe needs to verify that you are a legitimate organization because it is assessing your risk level. Because Stripe deals with the credit card companies directly. And so if a customer charges back on the credit card, what's going to happen is that the credit card company is going to refund the customer, right, for their money, and then they're going to go ahead and come to Stripe and ask for the money from Stripe, and then Stripe is going to ask you for that money, okay? And so what happens is that if Stripe gets a lot of chargebacks, it means that it is not good for Stripe, and it is not good a relationship for the credit card company as well, right? And so what ends up happening is that they're going to ban your account if you end up getting a lot of refunds, if they end up getting a lot of chargebacks. And so in order to make sure that your account remains in good standing with Stripe, you need to make sure that your refund percentage is below 5%, okay? And you need to make sure that your chargeback percentage, right? Somebody saying that this is a fraudulent payment is less than 1%. Now, these are just general guidelines, but what that means is that for each chargeback that you get, you have to process 100 good transactions in order to balance this out, okay? And so keeping yourself in good standing with your payment processor is one of the most important objectives of your business, because if you cannot process payments and collect cash, then you literally run out of oxygen in your business. And so it's going to be very important that you are maintaining a good relationship with Stripe, because they are the biggest payment processor. They are the easiest to use. You don't want your Stripe account to get banned, because then all of a sudden your options or your easy options become a lot more limited. Okay, so as you are waiting for your account to get approved, make sure that you are doing everything above ground, you're doing everything legitimately, you're being ethical, and so that way you are able to stay in good standing with Stripe. And then finally, step number 8 is that once your Stripe account gets approved, you can then move on to the next part of this training, which is about setting up your payment terminal, which we're going to go ahead and talk about right now. All right, welcome to part 2, which is setting up your TCK payment terminal. We're going to go ahead and walk you through step by step on how to go ahead and do this. So the first thing you want to go ahead and do is you want to go ahead and log in to your ClientKit account. That's going to be very important. And then what you're going to go ahead and do is you're going to preview what an invoice is going to look like for your actual students or clients or anything like that. Okay, so how you're going to do this is you're going to go over to payments on the left side over here. Okay, you're going to go over to payments. And then from here, let me go ahead and make this a little bit bigger so you can see. From here, what you're going to go ahead and do is you're going to go ahead and click on new. And then what you're going to be able to do is click on new invoice. Okay, now once you go ahead and do this, you are going to go ahead and see there is an option to go ahead and enable Stripe Connect. This is going to be important, where you can now go ahead and connect Stripe to your payment terminal here in the ClientKit, okay? Now, if you do end up clicking do it later, where you can go is if you go back, you can actually go ahead and click on integrations here and then connect your Stripe account once it's active to your TCK payment terminal from there, okay? Now, the other point, as you go ahead and preview what an invoice is going to look like, this is what it looks like. And you're gonna see that this is a place for your logo, where I'll show you where you can go ahead and import a logo right now. And then over here, you can go ahead and see, okay, bill to, you can go ahead and add a client, either manually or add them into the system. And then over here, you can go ahead and add what you are charging them for, okay? Now, let's go ahead and talk about the logo. Yes, you can go ahead and import a logo right there manually. And all you do is you just go over to your Canva account, you export, and then you just go ahead and import it. Or you can go ahead and set it up under settings for your entire company as a whole. And so how you're going to go ahead and do that is you go over to settings and then business info, and then right over here, you can go ahead and go into Canva, which you have a free account for. You can go ahead and create a free document on there, right? A free canvas, make it this size, and then you can go ahead and import that in here and then kind of mess around with it, export it, import it, export it, import it, kind of go back and forth and make sure that it fits properly in here. And so when you actually go ahead and do that, then when you go over to payments and then you go over to new invoice, it's going to show up automatically over here. And then also in that settings place that we were just at right now, you're also going to be able to go in and edit, some of the information around the address and all that kind of stuff there as well. And so from there, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're now going to go ahead and look at the guide and see what other things we have on here, right? So we talked about the business logo. We went ahead and talked about how it's going to show on your invoice, right? We're going to go ahead and create a test invoice, and you're going to add yourself as a client, okay? And then you're going to go ahead and click on add item. And then when you click on add item, it's going to go ahead and have a bunch of different fields that you can go ahead and have on here. So if I click on add item, you'll see it comes over here, select product. There's no products in here right now. So I click on new item. And then from there, I can click on product name. So this is, XYZ transformation program. And then from there, digital product or physical product is going to be a service. So what we do is we mainly provide a service, right? Information as a service is what we're doing. So you could also potentially put a digital good on here if you needed to as well. Price name, you can go ahead and put, XYZ coaching program, XYZ transformation program, and then the amount, you can go ahead and just put $1 for now or whatever if you wanted to go ahead and test it out. And then if we go back over here, you're going to see that is all documented inside of the guide as you go ahead and create this test invoice for yourself as well, okay? And then from there, what you're then going to go ahead and do is in the payment terminal, you're going to be able to mess around with this. If you click on the 3 dots, you can click on preview to see what the actual invoice is going to look like when you actually send it to your client, okay? And then you can also click click on record payment. Now, record payment is going to be, you'll see I have to fill in the contact details. If I click on add a client, let's say, for example, I click add a new client, and then I go ahead and click on, let's say Yasin, and then we just say, test. And then the test is going to be, test123 at, gmail.com or mail.com or whatever, right? Phone number. We're going to be able to just go ahead and put some random numbers in here just for the sake of the testing of it. And then you can add an address if you wanted to as well. So, we're going to go ahead and click on save. And then once we click on save, we're going to go ahead and go over here and click on record payment. And you're going to see that it makes me add at least one item. So I'm going to go ahead and add another item on here, add a new one on here, right? XYZ transformation program. This is going to be a service. Price name, XYZ coaching. Okay. Add the dollar amount. The dollar amount is going to be $1. Okay. Add new item. Beautiful. And then I go ahead and click on 3 dots. Finally, now I can click on record payment. And then you'll see that it allows me to either charge a card right now or record manually. Okay. Now, right now, I don't actually have Stripe connected because this is just an example. But if I clicked on charge a card, it would allow me to be able to charge the customer's card directly right here if there is a card saved on file, or it would allow me to be able to enter in the card details if I was, let's say, taking payment over the phone for this invoice. Okay. That's what all of that would look like. And so all of that is underneath the 3 dots. Okay, right here. And then from there, you also have the option to be able to save. So you can obviously just save it. And then over here, you can also go ahead and, there's mark as save here. But if you send, it'll give you the option to be able to either send it as an email and a text, or just an email or just a text. And then you have additional options to be able to go ahead and do this payment in test mode or in live mode. Obviously, if it's a real student, you want to go ahead and do it in live mode. Okay, so those are all of the options and what that looks like for the actual TCK payment terminal. Again, remember, because of the fact that this has all already been included for you as an RWA student for a penny a month, this is not any additional cost. This is just the amazingness of the client kit that is available for you as a Remote Wellness Academy student. And so that is going to be really part number 2 of this entire process of getting your payment set up properly, is to make sure that you got your Stripe set up, and then you're going to connect your Stripe to the TCK payment terminal and then walk through it step by step and then really test it on yourself. So what we're going to go ahead and do next is we're going to go ahead and cut over to part number 3 of this entire process now. All right, welcome to part 3 of the step-by-step instructions of setting up your payment account and your payment system. So what we're going to go ahead and do is part 3 is going to be all about testing the entire setup. Okay, so once you have everything set up from part 1 and part 2, it's going to be now time to do a complete test. And we recommend that you do a live test. Now, there is a way to go ahead and do a test mode test as well. If you're familiar with how to do all of that, that's up to you. But we recommend going ahead and creating an invoice for $1 and then actually going ahead and seeing, okay, hey, I sent the invoice to myself. Okay. I went ahead and paid it from the client kit. And then does it show up in Stripe? And then does it show up in the bank account, right? So all of the instructions are there. Charge your own credit card, right? Charge your own debit card, whatever it might be. Check if the card was actually charged. Check if the transaction in TCK showed up. Check your Stripe to make sure that the transaction came through there. And then in 2 to 3 days, you're going to make sure that the money clears into your bank account as well. Okay. And so you want to make sure that you do an end-to-end test to make sure that the entire system is operational and working properly. Okay. And then you can also go ahead and test out what it might look like if you go ahead and do, let's say, the 3 dots. I went ahead and switched accounts so you can see on the demo account, record payment. And then if I click on charge a card, if there is a saved card on file, then it'll show up on here. And then if I want to go ahead and use a new card and charge this student or this client or this customer right here on the spot, maybe over the phone or something, I can go ahead and do that without having to send them the invoice as well. So there are many options on here. You want to go ahead and play around, make sure that you test everything so that way everything is in fact working properly, because the last thing you want to do is actually get to the point where you're transacting money and then you have no idea how to actually do it. So just make sure that you are playing around with it, exploring it, make sure you are doing everything properly and building on it step by step, and you should have no problems from there. And then of course, if you have any issues with TCK, make sure you reach out to the priority support for TCK. If you have any issues with Stripe, make sure you reach out to the support for Stripe. And then of course, we are here as a resort if you actually need us to, as well as a last resort, we can help you as well. And so with that being said, that was the step-by-step instructions of actually setting up your payment system so that way you are able to go ahead and accept payments step by step. Make sure you follow the instructions. Do not get stuck. Do not get overwhelmed. Don't worry if it's the first time you're doing this. It's normal to be overwhelmed. It's normal to go ahead and be a little bit scared or kind of uncertain about this. It's fine. Just go through it anyways. And I promise you, it'll become a breeze for you. Just follow the instructions. And so with that being said, what we're going to go ahead and do now is we're going to go ahead and cut back over to the main training. All right, welcome back from that quick mini training about the step-by-step instructions of accepting your payments. So you're going to see that all of the foundational pieces that we are putting together work like a machine throughout this entire training, right? It talks about, hey, getting your legal entity set up. And then we go and talk about your bank account. And then your bank account hooks up into your payment processor. And all of this works together, okay? Now, as we start to really get to the tail end of this training, we've now gone ahead and completed 2 of those foundational elements, which was the corporations and legal entities. We've now gone ahead and talked about accepting payments. We're now going to go ahead and talk about the legal agreement piece of this entire process and really break that down for you. Okay, so a legal agreement is an agreement that is in place to really set the expectations between yourself and your clients, your students, your customers, whatever it might be. Okay, now the question that might come up is, but Coach Yasin, I thought the legal agreement was in place for legal protection as well. But here's the thing. Yes, it absolutely is, but that's if you ever have to get to that point, because here's our methodology around this, and this is very important for you to pay attention to, okay? Our methodology around this is around the ideas of wasting time and negativity. So can you go after a student legally if they fail to abide by the agreement or fail to make their payments? Sure. But here's the thing. In general, people do not respect agreements in the vast majority of society, unfortunately, okay? And so yes, you are going to have students who are unethical, who are limbic, who make excuses, who are in scarcity mindset, who don't really care about consequences, okay? And when you come across customers like that, okay, I didn't say if, I said when you come across customers like that, because I'm not going to sugarcoat this for you, okay? Business is rough. You are going to come across customers who are going to be like that. People are mean out there. That's the truth, okay? What ends up happening is that you don't want to end up wasting so much of your time going after people who are from the very start unethical, limbic, and they make excuses. So yes, a legal agreement helps make sure that everyone is taking things seriously, is making sure that we set the expectations in case we have to use it. But at the same time, you don't ever really want to have to use it. And even when you can use it, you're like, do I really want to waste my time with a negative human being like this, right? And so this is the mindset that we approach legal agreements with, so that way we can avoid being busy with trying to sue people or go after people. And instead we can focus on the people that do want to work with us instead of chasing those who don't. And so the reason why we're mentioning this is because some people, when they first get into business, specifically service-based businesses, right, information businesses, transformation businesses, right, where you're working with clients and students, they get so caught up with agreements and they get so frustrated, right, when clients and students don't abide by them, when the truth is that if you ever actually get to the point where you got to say, hey, you signed an agreement, listen to me, or I'm going to go after you or whatever, right? Here's the thing. You've probably already made 1,000 mistakes in setting the expectation and communicating and building rapport and listening to the customer or student, right? You've already made 1,000 mistakes before that. And so you want to focus on fixing those mistakes, even if it means you got to let this customer go, and make sure you do it properly with the next customer, okay? So you never want to actually get to the point where you got to flex your agreement power and say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and use my agreement against you and say that if you don't listen to me, or hey, you signed an agreement and all this kind of stuff. Okay? You don't ever want to get to that point, so that way you can avoid the negativity that is going on inside of your business, and you can really focus on the people that do want to work with you. Now, on the same note, when we talk about legal agreements, I do want to go ahead and make a quick note about insurance as well, okay? So before we actually get into the legal agreement template, some students might ask the question, hey, do I need insurance of any kind? And the answer to this is that it depends, because we do have some students inside of the program who are physicians, who are medical professionals, who are licensed therapists, right? And so at the same time, if they decided, those students, those RWA students, if they decided they wanted to include elements from their other careers into their remote wellness practice, then there might be a reason for them to look into insurance. It's not that expensive, but if they were doing that other kind of stuff where they're going out of scope, they're going out of practice, then they might need to look into insurance. Why? Because there's a thing that is called scope of practice that has to be preserved and protected, right? The reason why insurance exists is because certain professions have that requirement there, right? But here's the thing, for most remote wellness practitioners, the guidelines are pretty clear, is that if you are sticking to general education and you are helping your students develop skills and education around living a healthier life of wellness, then there is no insurance that is required in order to help Tina walk more, eat less cookies, and go to bed on time. Think about it, right? Like, would you really need insurance if you're just giving general recommendations that are pretty much common sense and that Tina knows that she should already be doing, but she just has difficulty actually doing them, right? If that was the case, then parents and friends would not be able to advise their inner circle about that on a daily basis, right? And so, yes, we are going to have a completely separate training on scope of practice by the end of this module. But what you need to know is this when it comes to insurance. Always, 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 always make sure that you are having your students refer or consult with their medical professionals before you go ahead and apply changes or recommend changes that are outside the scope of practice or the outside the scope of common sense, right? If a student says, hey, I have thyroid and, I got to change my medication, and then you go out there and make a silly, nonsensical comment and say, oh, I don't believe in medication and, whatever. And then the student does something to their medication, that's a big no-no. That's going to go against you, right? And so you want to make sure that you are staying within scope of practice. If you are not sure, you don't want to make things up. And so as long as you are sticking within scope of practice, then you are going to be good to go, because insurance is not a requirement for general education programs, okay? And this is what we talk about, the health distribution curve. It's very important to understand is that we are helping with general health and wellness, things around water, sleep, movement, eat less sugar, manage stress. If you're going into the other areas of life and you talk about relationships or money or business coaching or that kind of stuff, right? If you are sticking to scope of practice, obviously there's no insurance required for that, right? We're not saying that you have to go ahead and do this stuff. You're just providing general recommendations and holding the client and the student accountable to be able to do that kind of stuff, right? Versus when you actually get into like, okay, hey, now I'm going to go ahead and like cure a disease. I got to go ahead and get a medical degree. I'm going to cure an illness. That's the reason why in the medical profession, they do have malpractice insurance, right? That's why that exists. Same thing if you're talking about elite health, right? You're talking about studying anatomy and physiology and getting all these crazy certifications and all that kind of stuff, right? You got to be careful that you are staying within scope of practice so that you are covered, because it is just general skill building, general education. And if you are doing that, then you won't have to fall into the scope of having to have insurance. Okay. So just a quick note on there. So that way you are understanding how all of that works. And then of course, at the end of the day, we do not give you any specific advice as well. This is all just general information purposes. If you feel that you need insurance, make sure that you do consult a lawyer or somebody like that. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and play that card here. So that way you understand that, hey, we've gone ahead and given you a recommendation. It's up to you whether you decide to abide by that recommendation or not. This is just from our own experience, and we're just sharing with you what has worked for us, okay? Now, with that being said, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're now going to go ahead and walk you through the step-by-step instructions on how to actually get the software and the technology piece of your student agreement set up, so that way you are covered on that side, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and cut over to a mini training that is going to walk you through that entire process step by step right now. All right, welcome to this quick mini training about getting your student agreement set up. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to walk you through how to be able to set this up properly. Now, here's the thing about this. Although the client kit does have a forms feature, honestly, it is too technical for most RWA students to be able to set up in order to help make it legally binding, okay? And so what we're going to actually go ahead and do is we're actually going to go ahead and sign up for a different software that's a free software called JotForm that's going to help you actually create your student agreement. Now, here's the thing about this. In the beginning, for your first students, this is going to work completely fine. And then as you grow larger, you might want to actually start looking into other softwares that are even more legally binding because they have IP certification and IP certificates and all of this kind of stuff, like a software like PandaDocs. And so to this day, because of the fact that we weren't too happy with the fact that the client kit is a little bit too more technical to sign up with, we actually went ahead and we still to this day use PandaDocs because of the fact that they have extremely high security protocols and that kind of stuff. But again, that is a paid version that you might want to consider later on down the road. For right now, the JotForm free account is going to be more than enough. Okay, so when starting out, even for our remote wellness practice, we actually used JotForm for a very long time, and then we only switched to PandaDoc later on, like super much later on. Okay, so all we're doing right now inside of this training is we're just sharing our experience and what has worked for us. And so just please make sure that you are making the best decision for yourself. If you decide, you know what, I want to go ahead and sign up for PandaDoc off the bat, that is completely up to you. We're going to walk you through the cheap and the affordable way. Okay, it might not be as legally binding as something that has an IP certification to it or IP certificate to it, but that is completely up to you, okay? Now, if you do decide in the future that you want to go ahead and go through PandaDoc or any other software on there, let us know by shooting us an email at support@remotewellnessacademy.com, and we can share with you our PandaDoc agreement template as well. But for the purposes of this setup, we're going to be walking you through how to actually set all of this up through JotForm and provide you with the template for that as well, so that we can properly over deliver for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and walk this through in terms of part one of creating your JotForm account. What you're going to go ahead and do is you are going to go ahead and go to jotform.com. Okay, you're going to be able to read about all about what they're about, their pricing, all of that kind of stuff. The free account is going to be more than enough for you. Okay, you're going to go ahead and sign up with your email. You're going to go ahead and create an account, and then from there you're going to be able to go ahead and enter in, hey, what's your organization name, your job title, your industry, all of that kind of stuff. For the purposes of JotForm, this stuff doesn't really matter in terms of having accuracy. They're just doing it to collect data for their own purposes. So go ahead and just make sure that you create your JotForm account for free. That is going to be step number one, and that is going to be part number one. And now I'm going to go ahead and skip over to part number two and walk you through how to import the template that we're going to provide for you, as well as how to be able to edit that template as well. All right, welcome to part number two of this entire process. And so when you actually go ahead and create your free JotForm account, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go ahead and import the template that we provide for you. And so this is a part of the RWA over delivery experience, is that we are going to go ahead and provide you a template for you to actually go ahead and get started off with that has already been vetted by our legal team. Okay, so how you're going to do this is when you actually create your free account, you are going to have a link inside of the guide, as well as underneath the action steps of this training. There's going to be a link to an actual template. When you click on that link, it is going to take you to a template that looks something like this. Now, the thing is that you are not going to be able to edit the template. What you have to do is you have to go ahead and actually import that template into your JotForm account. This is how you're going to do that. You're going to go ahead and click on Create Form. Okay, so right here, you're going to click on Create Form, and then you're going to go ahead and click on Import Form, and then you're going to go ahead and click right over here is going to be from a web page. And then what you're going to go ahead and do is you're going to go ahead and copy the URL of the template that we provide for you. Okay, so that URL is going to be right here. And I'm going to walk you through exactly, let me see if I can go ahead and bring this screen down so I can show you where that URL is going to be right here. Yep, there we go. And so this URL that is right here, this is going to be the URL that you need to copy, so that way you can actually go ahead and copy this right here, right? Copy. And you're going to go ahead and paste that right over here. And then you're going to go ahead and click on Create Form. And so when you actually go ahead and do that, then it's going to go ahead and create a copy of that. It's going to go ahead and create a clone of that, so that way you can actually go ahead and edit the templates. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this back up in here so that way it's back aligned. Okay, so that is going to be how you actually import the form. Okay, so please do not send us support inquiries and saying, oh, you guys sent me the link for the template, I'm not able to edit it, what's going on? It's because you have to import the template into your JotForm account. So make sure you actually do that. Okay, that's very, very, very important. Next, after you've gone ahead and imported the actual template, you are then going to go ahead and be able to edit that template. Okay, what you're going to go ahead and do is you're going to be able to go ahead and actually edit the logo on this, right? So you can remove the logo, add your own logo, change the name on this. And then what you're going to do is you're going to scroll down here to the agreement section, and wherever it says insert name of company here, that is going to be where you go ahead and insert your own name, your legal name, your sole prop name, your LLC name, whatever that might look like. Okay, and then you're going to see that it has been annotated for you where you're going to be putting things that are going to be on there. Now, this is just a template, so it is 100% editable by you. And so all you're going to be able to do is you go ahead and just click in here. Okay, and then you're going to go ahead and put, okay, insert company name, participation terms, terms of sale, all of that has already been prepared for you, and you will be able to go ahead and edit all of that step by step by step. Okay, so you want to go ahead and search anywhere in the entire document that it says insert name of company, it's going to say insert name of company, and then in certain places, it's also going to say insert the support email. And so this is the reason why we walked you through this step by step to set up your support email before this, whether that be the option 1 or the option 2, the separate inbox or forwarding it to your personal inbox, it doesn't matter. You can go ahead and insert your support email here as well. So that way it is inside of the agreement. Now, after you actually do that, okay, you're going to go ahead and click on that check mark icon so you can save it, okay? You can look at everything else that's on here. You're more than welcome to go ahead and edit this. This is 100% completely yours. It's a template that we're providing to over deliver. But remember, this is at the end of the day, your organization. And so you can go ahead and edit this whatever way you want. Please do not be a remote control student. Please don't expect to be spoon-fed. Please don't expect to follow blindly. Make sure that you are going ahead and taking initiative and being resourceful with this. So if you want to add other things, you want to go ahead and add, hey, you know what? We want to send you gifts. We want your address. We want your date of birth. We want all of that kind of stuff. You can feel free to go ahead and add that in here if you would like, okay? And then obviously at the very end, you do have that signature date. All of that has already been set up for you. So that way you don't have to worry about that. And then the other thing is that you're going to come over here to settings, and then you want to make sure that you go over here to emails, and then you click on notifications. So that way, whenever anybody completes this agreement, you get a notification, as well as a PDF copy is sent out to the student. So that way they have a copy of it inside of their email as well. Okay. And so that is going to be where you go into settings. And then once you actually click on settings, you can go ahead and edit the notification email. You can edit the autoresponder email as well. And then from there, you want to go ahead and click on publish, and you can see the link. And once you actually open this up in a new tab, you'll be able to go ahead and test it yourself as well. The other point I want to go ahead and make around this is that, let's say, for example, I open this up, you can actually go ahead and pre-populate this for your students as well if you would like. Let's say, for example, program investment is going to be, I don't know, let's say, 3,600 split in payments of 3, whatever it might be, right? So you auto-populate this, and then you can actually come down here and click on save. And then when you do that, it'll allow you to be able to get a shareable link that you can then actually share with your student as well, okay? So this is actually a shareable link that you can actually pre-populate for your student, okay? And then obviously there's a whole bunch of other instructions inside of the actual guide that you can look at if you need further referencing for that. This is all going to be very important for you to look through. And then finally, part number 3 of this entire process is to make sure that you actually go ahead and practice this entire setup from scratch. Like, actually send yourself the link via email or whatever, right? Actually fill it out in an incognito window in Chrome, see what that looks like, right? Send yourself the agreement link. And then the other point about this is that in an upcoming training, we're actually going to be walking you through how to set up your ClientKit account. So that way you can actually text this link to your prospects or to your students as well. So that way you can actually text message it to them directly to their phone while you are on maybe the strategy session with them, or let's say you're doing this through Zoom, you can send it through the Zoom chat. There's just a lot of different options for this, okay? So the biggest thing is that you want to be familiar with this, kind of play around with it and see what it looks like when you submit it, how to be able to check if the email gets there, check if, you got the email, put a different email on there, check if you got the PDF copy, all of that is what you want to mess around with. And then the biggest thing with this is that Jotform has an amazing customer support team. So if you do need help, they have that help box right there. You can go out there. They have video tutorials, they have user guides, keyboard shortcuts, support form. They have all of that on there, right? If you need help with anything, explore, click around, click build, settings, publish. You'll be able to come down here, click on, okay, what does it look like if I come down here and hit submit? If I, properties, just look at how to be able to use Jotform. It's going to be a skill that's going to be very important for you to be able to learn. And then another thing I'm going to go ahead and mention is that if I go ahead and click on settings, you'll be able to see the titles on here, what the thank you page looks like. There's integrations. All of that is what you can actually go ahead and mess around with, show more options, everything that's in here. And so I would highly recommend that you go ahead and just make sure that you test the entire setup, so that way you are rocking and rolling and you are doing this properly, okay? So with that being said, this has been the step-by-step instructions to actually get your student agreement set up. And like I said, we are going to be starting with the free Jotform account, and then you will be able to work your way up from there. But for your beginner initial students, this is going to be more than enough in order for you to actually get started. So follow the step-by-step instructions. Make sure you reach out to Jotform support if you have any questions, and then reach out to us if you have any questions around the strategy of this as well. And so with that being said, we're going to go ahead and cut back over to the main training right now. All right, welcome back from that mini training about the step-by-step process of setting up your student agreement. Now, guess what? I have great news, because we are closing out this training. We have gone ahead and talked about all of the foundational pieces. And like I said, I was not joking when we went ahead and started this. We said it was going to be like a seminar, like a textbook. It was going to be something that was going to be reference material for you, okay? So absolutely, we were not joking. So as we start to close out this training, okay, I want you to go ahead and even realize what we were talking about when we first started this training, right? We said that we have spent an insane amount of time putting this training together for you. This is why we said that this training is the definition of why this program is different. For too many years, when starting out as beginners in this online income game, we were all so confused about all of the questions that were addressed inside of this training. And so looking back, we wish that someone would have explained to us all of this as simply and as easily as we have done inside of this training, okay? This training was the answer to the questions that we asked ourselves for so many years, so that way our students, aka you, would not have to deal with those same struggles ever again. Corporations and legal entities, accepting payments, and the legal and student agreement, okay? So we hope that all of this painstaking hours that the entire team has put together in order to bring you this training has shown, and why we are working towards providing the highest caliber education that, in our opinion, we believe that no one else in the entire internet is providing to their students, okay? So thank you so much for being so supportive as an RWA family. Holy over delivery, Batman. RWA is amazing. So let's go ahead and close out this training and talk about your student engagement question for this specific training. There's going to be 3 of them. Number 1, go ahead and fill in the blank. I thought this training was XYZ. What are your thoughts on this training? What did you like and enjoy about this training? What takeaways, insights, ahas, or appreciations did you have? And then number 3, this is going to be important. Do you have any questions about anything that was discussed in this training? Now, just a quick note. Yes, we know that some of the trainings are super jam-packed. They are longer and they are more dense. I told you from the very beginning, it was going to be similar to a seminar. It was going to be jam-packed. It was going to be like a textbook reference material, right? So we don't need you to tell us that. We know that already. But what we do want to know is we want to know your genuine thoughts, questions, and comments. It's going to also help you cement this in your mind as well. With that being said, just a quick reminder in terms of how to ask questions. Make sure you go ahead and use the green chat icon at the bottom right of your RWA classroom if you have questions that are outside of a specific training. But for the most part, make sure that you ask questions inside of the student community post and tag RWA coaches. The page is RWA coaches. Make sure you tag that page so that way we actually get a notification, so that way we don't miss your question. And then just in case you ask a question and don't see an answer from RWA coaches, then you can go ahead and email our support team and we'll get a coach to be able to answer that as soon as possible. Of course, coaching call and office hour links are inside of your RWA classroom as well. And then any other questions, make sure you go ahead and reach out to support using that green chat icon. Okay, so please make sure that you do use these support channels properly. With that being said, let's go ahead and talk about your action steps to make sure that you are rocking and rolling. Of course, action step number 1 is to make sure that you do go ahead and watch and study this training in full. That is going to be action step number 1. Action step number 2 is to make sure you go ahead and complete the engagement questions for this training, the ones that we went ahead and talked about above. Action step number 3 is to go ahead and set up your legal entity, regardless of what option you decided to go with, whether that was the LLC route, and then you went ahead and work with our partner, or you wanted to go ahead and go the sole prop route. Action step number 4 is to make sure that you go ahead and set up your business bank account, if that is applicable. If you are going to be transacting money, it's going to be absolutely critical. Action step number 5 from there, you are going to go ahead and make sure that you set up your payment processor. Make sure you go ahead and get your Stripe account approved. Action step number 6, make sure you go ahead and set up your payment terminal from the client kit. Make sure you go ahead and actually connect that to your Stripe account and actually test the entire payment system. Action step number 8, go ahead and create your Jotform account. Action step number 9, import the template, customize the template. And then here's the big one. This is going to be for accountability purposes. Action step number 11. Once you actually go ahead and complete all of that, or as you are completing each one as you're going along with it, you're going to go ahead and drop a comment, or you can reply to your previous original comment that we went ahead and talked about from action step number 2. And you're going to go ahead and let us know, hey, what legal entity option did you decide to go with? Are you going to be going with sole prop, LLC? Are you going to be going with the business bank account, no business bank account? And then if you are going with the LLC route, did you schedule your call with the recommended advisor that we recommended for you with the partner? And then how did that call go, right? Or when did you schedule that call for? And then you're also going to go ahead and let us know, hey, did you create your business checking account? Okay, what bank did you open it with? How did that go? And how are you feeling overall? And then number 3 on here, did you set up your payment processor? Did you get your account approved from Stripe? How did that go? Did you complete the test payment? Did you connect everything together? And then finally, also you can go ahead and let us know, did you complete setting up your Jotform agreement, and how did that go as well? So like I said, said, you can go ahead. I know some of these things might take some time. So, as you go ahead and decide the legal entity, you decide to go ahead and reply to a comment with that. And then you can either edit that comment, or you can go ahead and drop a new replied comment and let us know. So this is for accountability purposes, because if we do not see these comments inside of the student community, we're going to assume that you have not yet completed them because we have not yet heard from you. And so we're going to go ahead and make sure that you are completing that for accountability purposes. Okay, so I know this training was a doozy. It was definitely one that was sort of like a seminar, textbook reference style training, but I'm super pumped for you to go out there and get all of your legal, finance, and accounting foundations set up. This is Coach Yasin again checking out, and I will catch you inside of the next training.